Welcome to season 3. Woo! Of SteeleWatching. I am Eric. I'm one of the hosts here, and across the way from me, many, many miles away from me, is
kilometers.
Oh yes. Oh, silly me.
You got to get hip to the metric system. And I am Sara. I'm having a rough week.
Yes. Well, we won't go into any details. Suffice it to say that it's the kind of week that nobody would wish on their... Okay, they might wish it on their enemy, but not on their friends. Anyway, season 3. Before we get into the episode, do you want to start the discussion on the dilemma, the mess that is season 3?
Yeah. So I was, when Eric and I started talking about this podcast before we even started it, we kind of debated whether to talk about it in the order that the episodes are on the DVDs, or the order they aired.
Which is the aired order.
Yeah, the order they aired, or production order, or some sort of. And it was easy enough for seasons 1 and 2 because there was only minor differences. But I don't remember, I'll be honest, I don't remember who told me. There was somebody in the Steele Watchers group that basically had said there was a better order to watch season 3 in. And I don't remember whether they said this was actually the order that it was intended to air, or if it was just a fan edit of how it would make more sense. But I was given a list of episode orders that differs from what we got in terms of what actually aired. And I confess I've struggled with season 3 because it feels so inconsistent, because you've got at the end of this episode what we call the cans agreement, or the can agreement, where they decide that they can't mix business and pleasure. And then you've got episodes where they are not together, and then there's an episode where they are, and then there's an episode where they're not, and then there's an episode where they are, and eventually there's an episode where they get back together, and you're going, what? Where? Huh? And then, Stealing the Chips comes after that, and he's chasing around after Miss Dalrymple, and you're like, this makes no sense.
I'll agree. Chasing after Miss Dalrymple makes no sense.
Well, I don't know. Gina Davis is pretty stunning, but putting that aside.
Okay. Not my flavor.
But putting that aside, there's a fan edit that I was sent, or again, I don't know if this was the original intention of the air dates. If somebody knows, whoever it was sent me this order, I can maybe post it in the group. But either way, it was an order where all the episodes where they're not together come first, and then the episode where they get back together, and then the episodes where they're together come after, and it makes for a far more consistent season. I watched it that way, and I went, wow, okay, no, season 3 is actually pretty good. It just, the way the episodes air is frustrating. But that being said, we committed to going with the air date order, so that's what we're going to do. But I almost screwed up because I finished making my notes for this episode, and I was going to start to try to get ahead, and then I forgot to check, and I was like, oh, wait, no. Okay, I gotta make sure I'm doing the right. I almost watched the wrong episode. So, that's kind of where we landed on that.
I hadn't thought about it because I knew that season 1 there were some air date discrepancies.
Yeah,
let's call it that, air date discrepancies. How's that for a term? And so, yeah, that's what led to the initial discussion between you and I. And season 1 could have benefited from being shown in a different order, but I mean, it wasn't nearly as bad as what I'm seeing here. Now, I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, well,
checkbox. Anyway, so I'm one of those people that when you have facts and evidence, you kind of got to give some credence to that. And we do have fact and evidence, and that's called the production codes. And anybody, even though we're not in television, anybody who has done a little bit of research into television realizes that those production codes are issued to episodes based on the intended or close to the intended order of them being produced, which presumes or implies that the storylines also follow kind of that sequence.
One would think.
One would think. One would think.
One would think.
However, based on what you had brought up, I did a quick look at season 3, and oh boy, what a mess. What a mess. Because when you put them in production code order, and keeping in mind also that there are some production codes missing.
That's
there are production codes missing. Well, I don't mean that we've got episodes that don't have production codes. I mean, we've got production codes that don't have episodes.
Oh.
There's just nothing there. So, for example, well, and the other thing I'll say here is that I don't know at what point the production code gets assigned. However, looking at the script that we have of this episode, Steele At It, the 3rd season premiere episode, and we'll get into this a little bit more here. The episode aired in September of 1984.
Yeah.
The typed date information on the script that we have is June 14th with revisions. Yes. With revisions for June 18th and 19th. It has a production code of 4707. And there's a handwritten note on here at the top, which I'm guessing is supposed to mean something. It says number 5, like maybe the 5th episode, and a date of 7/16 through 7/24, which I'm guessing was their projected production shooting date for this episode. And if you lay the episodes out in production code order, Steele At It comes not quite 5. It's number 6. So we've got in production code order, Blue-Blooded Steele, Breath of Steele, Lofty Steele, Let's Steal a Plot, Second Base Steele, and then Steele At It. So it was for the 3rd season, based on the production code assignments, it was apparently projected as being the 5th episode.
Weird.
Wow, that is total. And when you look at the episodes in production code order and compare that to the aired orders for those episodes,
right?
It's a mess. For example, aired order to correspond with production code sequence is 5, 10, 2, 11, 4, 1, 20, 6, 8, 3, 12, 21. I mean, it's a mess.
Wow.
It's a mess. And I know that sometimes production codes get shot out of order. Episodes get shot out of order because of somebody's availability, for example, a guest star.
Yeah.
You know, well, I can't be here that week. I can be here a week before. I can be here a week after, whatever. And so they'll adjust the shooting schedule to accommodate. But that still doesn't change the fact that presumably the production code order is the intended order for the story sequence.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing that somebody at the network is responsible for this mess. I'm not going to absolutely say that it's somebody at the network, because obviously I don't know. And it could be somebody at the production company had a hand in it as well. MTM, all the way from Grant Tinker all the way down. Who knows? But yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess.
And what's frustrating about it is that other seasons, it wouldn't matter so much because this show, like many of the shows in this particular era, went out of its way not to be too continuous. So Like, you could shuffle pretty much most of season 2 around, and it wouldn't be a big deal. Same with season 1. But this season, you've got the can agreement, which kind of like they,
Right.
skipping to the end of the episode, they break up, or they at least sort of break up. They decide to not mix business with pleasure, and then you've got episodes where they are clearly together, episodes where they're clearly not, and they've mixed them all about. And there's an episode where they clearly get back together. So
yes, you have two key points in 2 episodes in this season that significantly alter the nature of their relationship, and yet they just kind of throw the episodes out there helter-skelter.
This is the only season, perhaps, aside from maybe 5, I guess, but whatever, if we can call it a season. But this is the only season where it really does matter which order you show them in, and they crap the bed. So
yeah. And part of that is just due to the nature of the show, the design of the show, and that sort of thing. It would have been nice if they could have done something, I'll say, a little more like Scarecrow and Mrs. King, which many decades later, I have developed an appreciation for that show. I'll admit I was not a big fan of it when it first came on, because it was like, okay, you ripped off Remington Steele, just changed it a little bit. But I now appreciate the show. And one of the things that they did was they were developing this relationship between the 2 characters that ultimately ended in a marriage relationship. But it was so subtle and so not in your face, and it wasn't a main feature of the stories, that you could shuffle them around if you needed to and get away with it, because it was a slow, it's like on a scale of 1 to 100, if 100 is maximum volume for your stereo and 1 is off, basically, you're not going to notice a difference between going from 50 to 51 to 52 versus going from 50 to 52 to 51. It's just not, the difference is not appreciable. So in Remington Steele, order matters. And they blew it.
So
anyway,
probably good that we just kind of address that up front, because and I think that we'll have to be maybe a little more forgiving in some of our criticisms, because there's going to be episodes where, based on air date, the episode is going to be, very frustrating if we try to kind of make sense of it from a story perspective. So we'll have to continually probably disclaim our statements with, okay, well, this is a criticism only because of when this episode aired, because this, otherwise we're going to sound like broken records going, this doesn't make any sense. Why are they together? Why are they not together? So
anyway, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into Steele At It. First aired in September, as I said earlier, on the 25th, specifically of September of 1984. It was written by Jeff Melvoin. Hey, Jeff, how you doing, buddy? And directed by Don Weiss.
I read a little footnote in Judith's book that said that they all took their families on vacation when they filmed in the Riviera. So, like, Pierce brought his wife and his kids, and I think Doris Roberts brought her niece or something like that, and they basically just all had a vacation.
Stephanie brought her niece.
Stephanie brought her niece,
and Doris brought her son.
Right. So that would be kind of cool to be filming.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because they began season 2 on location too, so kind of neat.
Well, and it's nice that they were allowed to do that. Not every TV show, not every production staff, not every executive producer would welcome that, because it could be a distraction. But
true.
You gotta commend the producers of the show for letting them do that, because that was something that that made it special. And it also probably, I'm sure, helped Doris and Stephanie and Pierce because, I mean, you don't want to be away from your family for
exactly
however long it takes, and we know that they have several episodes that take place in that area. And so I'm sure that they shot them all kind of around the same time. So
probably,
they would have been out of pocket for, a month or so. So yeah, it was kind of nice. Anyway, I went with the TV Guide listing, and it goes something like this. As a matter of fact, it goes exactly like this. Laura is ready for romance as the third season opens on the French Riviera. Ooh. Steele, however, is involved with a Frenchwoman and linked to a theft. And to Laura, these situations are equally compromising. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I have my note here that you just mentioned from Judith's book. Hey, Judith, how you doing? Love your book. Promote it. Yay. Steele loved after all these years. Oh, that reminds me. Did you see the post? Okay. Tangent alert. We need to get some sort of
gotten to the first scene.
Somebody posted a screenshot that they did on a listing for Judith's book on Amazon.
Oh, yes, I saw that. Yeah.
It was like, what, $2,700? It's like asking price. They're not going to get that. but that's crazy money. I mean, it's a good book, but I mean,
I'd feel pretty good about that if I were the author. So,
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, let's take this moment to just kind of nudge Judith and say, Judith, obviously there's a market out there for your book. So, if you ever want to do a special printing, you probably.
Well, that's how I got mine.
Yeah.
I think it was 2020. She did a limited print run, and that's when I finally got my hands on it because I could have gotten the PDF, I suppose, but I wanted to have a physical copy.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got 2 copies of the paperback. I want to get the hardcover version, but anyway,
that's the dream.
I think, did I mention that in the last episode? Yeah. If you have a hardcover version, remember me in your will. Yeah. Anyway, so the episode begins with various scenes shot on various scenes shot on the French Riviera, both day and night shots. And then we are mowing our lawn. The guy next door is mowing his lawn. Okay. So then we are at the Con Theater where the Stanford University Alumni Glee Club is performing a one-night only benefit for something. We don't know what. It doesn't say.
I have some questions.
Okay.
About it. Like several, because, okay, first of all, as an alumni of a university myself, I've never heard of like alumni glee. I've never heard of like clubs reserved for alumni, but I mean, maybe they exist. So that one's not maybe the biggest deal, but
I can confirm that there are such organizations because I know of at least one. Yes.
We haven't seen any evidence that A, Laura is a part of a glee club ever.
No.
And B, are we to believe that they're that well known that they would be performing in like overseas? Like this is it says, I don't know. I'm and then it says one night only, but then later on, I can't remember. Someone mentions it being her final performance, which would indicate that there were other performances.
Well, but not necessarily at the theater they were at.
Okay, fair enough.
Or perhaps not necessarily a benefit. But yeah, I would. My guess was when I saw that, because I had kind of the same thought, was that they had done other performances elsewhere, and then it was one night only at this location.
So, okay, they're on tour? Who are they, Bruce Springsteen? Come on. Like,
who?
They get a European tour? Like, it seems like a very convenient plot device to get them to Europe.
Anyway, yes. So anyway, we see Laura in a fancy dress in the front row of the group, which is being directed by a youngish man with floppish hair and large glasses. And a lot of stuff about him fairly shouts out awkward nerd. Well,
Yep.
okay, awkward. I have in my
Well,
notes not to say
nerd
nerd.
legit.
I'm sorry. I don't want to offend nerds.
I'm a
But
nerd.
yeah,
It's
he's a
fine.
nerd.
I'll authorize it.
And according to the script, the music should be Kyrie of the Missa Pape Marcelli by Palestrina. Okay. I don't know. I think I did look it up and it did seem to kind of match, but I'm not really familiar with this music. I don't do choral music. No way, no when, no how. So I don't know. Anyway, but that's what it's supposed to be. And then we jump to a moderately close shot of Remington Steele on a balcony at night, dressed in his crime clothes
Yeah.
with a large row of rope in his hand. And with one end of the rope tied to the building behind him, he tosses the rope over a railing. And then we see that he is several stories up on top of what appears to be a vintage apartment building. We say vintage because it sounds nicer than really old. So I am vintage. Okay. Anyway, he then lets himself down on the rope and enters through a curtain-covered window to an apartment. The room's dark. We hear voices coming from the next room. The door between the room he's in and the next room is open, and through that opening, we can see an older man sitting at a desk talking to a younger man who is standing by his side. And at an opportune time, Steele hops across the opening to the other side of the door. Back at the Glee Club, the performance continues. Back at the apartment, Steele is working on the combination of the safe. Opens the safe door and removes something. It's some sort of object wrapped in a black cloth. He unwraps the object. It is, according to the script, the Habsburg dagger, Hapsburg. A fantastic 16th century treasure, 8-inch silver blade, gold handle encrusted with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. That is from the script. Is this supposed to be a Habsburg dagger? Habsburg? Is this just a misspelling based on
I wondered that too.
mishearing of the name? Or is this intended to be kind of a reference to the Habsburg family, but not really?
I think it's one of those where it's supposed to be, but not really, because which is weird because they've had Laura and Steele encounter actual artifacts that exist in the past, like 5 Minutes of Cairo and whatnot. But I don't know. It just seems weird that it would be a spelling error. So,
well, my thought was that it was not necessarily a spelling error, but a hearing error, because if you didn't go and look it up in detail and you'd heard it, you might say, oh, Habsburg. You might mistaken the B for a P.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. Now, I did find a reference to a Habsburg dagger, but the images I found don't correspond to what we see. And for anybody who's interested, the Spanish Habsburgs were the most powerful global dynasty in the 16th and 17th century, but they lost it all, apparently as a result of several generations of marrying blood relatives.
Yeah.
Some of them moderately close blood relatives, hoping to keep a tight hold on their reigns of power. 6 out of the 8 royal weddings leading up to the birth of the last Habsburg, King Carlos II, were, hi, this is my cousin wife, whatever.
We're talking like Game of Thrones, basically.
Yeah, this is my niece wife.
Yeah. And I mean, they weren't the only ones. The English throne is pretty popular.
Yeah. That's a very popular thing to do when you are royalty. Anyway, the last Habsburg ruler, Carlos II, was the product of all of this. And in addition to being sterile, he was affected with so many health complaints that he was believed to be cursed.
Did you see that episode? Did you ever watch the show 30 Rock? There's an episode, this reminds me of it, where the characters work for a TV show that airs on NBC. And the head writer is played by Tina Fey, and the actress that plays one of the other characters, she plays an actress in the show. So she's on the show that Tina Fey writes for. And they're having this big benefit for a prince from basically what is a made-up European country, but is meant to sort of imply this sort of thing. Like his name is Prince Gerhardt, and Jenna, the character on the show, is determined to land herself a prince because she wants to be rich and, wealthy the rest of her life. And when she meets him, he's deformed. He can barely speak. He can't chew properly. He's sterile. And she finds out later he's only 25. It's because of centuries of inbreeding. And she's like determined to like be with him anyway. And then when she says she loves him, he basically like takes a sip of alcohol, which his body can't tolerate, and dies. So like she gets off the hook. Yeah. It just made me think of that because it was like, oh well, there's been so much inbreeding. This is basically how they all are now.
Anyway, back in the episode, after he admires the dagger for a few moments, Steele is nearly caught by the younger man from the next room who has come in to grab a wine bottle. And we don't know immediately what happened to Steele, but as the man leaves, we see the toes of a pair of shoes sticking out from behind the bottom of that curtain that we saw earlier. We hop back to the Glee Club performance. It is the interval. Mildred is telling Laura that it is magnifique. Laura asks Mildred where Mr. Steele is sitting, and Mildred doesn't know, but she's certain he's out there somewhere, saying that he wouldn't miss Laura's last concert for anything. Well, no, he's not there. He's shimmying down a rain pipe on that apartment building. And then after reaching the bottom, he pulls a black cloth from around his neck. I initially thought it was a dickie, but later on we see that it's really not quite.
The script describes it as a dickie, and
it does
call it a dickie, which I was confused too, because in my notes I had written dickie with a question mark, and then sort of went, well, it's kind of not really a dickie, sort of a dickie. I don't know.
Yeah, I had originally written dickie all over the place as well, and that sounds so wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we should explain, because dickies are not a popular item of clothing anymore, and there may be people listening who are wondering what the actual heck we're talking about.
Why are we talking about this? This is not an X-rated movie.
Dickie over and over again. It's a piece of clothing that used to be worn, like it sort of looked like a turtleneck, and then it had a bit of cloth that would fit underneath a shirt, so it would look like you have a shirt underneath another shirt, but in reality it was just a small bit of cloth. Am I describing that well enough, or could you do better?
No, I'm thinking it was something else. My understanding was that it was a replacement for a standard tie. It went around your neck, and it kind of puffed out, and kind of it was like a 3-dimensional thing under your jacket, over Google your shirt. Dickie. That Google
Dickie, and you'll see what I'm trying to describe here, because this is what I was thinking.
Okay, well,
anyone who's listening, if you have access to Google Dickie along with us, unless you're driving, in which case please don't. That would be dangerous.
All right, let's see. Let's see. It comes up with Dickies, the official website for workwear and apparel.
Not that.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, I see what you're saying, and yes, that is what is showing up. What am I thinking of then?
I don't know.
It's the.
It's a type of tie, is what you. It sounds like you're thinking of, like one of those.
Yeah, it's like it wraps around your neck so that it's it's like a tie in that respect, but ascot. Thank you.
Ascot?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go.
Boy, do I feel like an ascot.
What a dickie.
I
thought we were past the dad jokes, but obviously not.
Oh, anyway, where were we? Oh, yes.
One does count as a dickie because it's got the cloth. Anyway.
Okay, yeah. So he's got wearing a dickie. He pulls it off, tosses it into a nearby garbage can, and we can see that now, in fact, he is wearing a tux. And this dickie was just covering his white shirt so that it wouldn't be visible. And so
I mean, you gotta
There you
be
go.
impressed. Instead of like full crime clothes, he just went with a crime dickie, which shows that, you know, he's dressing for the occasion.
Sorry. That's just so wrong. So wrong. Anyway, after he throws it away, after he throws his dickie away.
And we've reached the part where Eric giggles like a little 12-year-old boy.
Anyway, after he throws it away, he hops on a motorcycle and makes his getaway.
Is it smart to throw it away? Because somebody who is as accomplished as he is, one would think, as maybe this is him, you know, he's been out of the game a bit, but I would think that throwing away the dickie that close to the crime scene is a rookie mistake. Like, that doesn't seem like something that he would do.
Well, you know, I'm also thinking, now that you mentioned that, yeah, it bothered me that he did that, but as you were saying that, it also made me think that, you know, they did have DNA technology back then. It wasn't as good as it is now, but they did have it. And if he sweated at all, perspired, and that material picked up any of that, they could potentially do a DNA match.
You'd think he'd hold on to it and discard it somewhere nowhere near the crime scene, because then it wouldn't be considered suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah. You would think.
Or set it on fire. Just saying.
We've already done that to this episode. Anyway, back at the theater, Laura is nervous. Mildred wonders what she has to be nervous about. The concert is going great. Well, Laura can't hold it any longer. She gushes to Mildred that tonight's the night, a new chapter to begin. It seems that the 2 previous weeks in Europe, for the first time, has opened her eyes and given her a new perspective on life. And Mildred, still unsure what they're talking about, comments that all she got was a tan. Laura continues, saying that she's always been so analytical, always needing to know how everything fits before she made a move. But no more. She can't live like that. She's got to let go. Take a chance. And Mildred, wanting to be supportive, feigns excitement, but still has no clue what they're talking about. And then in a more confidential tone, Laura tries to explain. She's had certain reservations about Mr. Steele, but they've worked side by side for 2 years now. They've grown together. He's more responsible, more caring, and Laura feeling bolder and more confident. So has Laura been studying to be a politician? I mean, she seems to be expert at talking around a subject and saying so much whilst actually saying absolutely nothing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that sounds about right.
But in spite of all of that, Mildred finally manages to figure it out. Laura intends to put out.
That's blunt. She's going after Mr. Steele's dickie.
Okay, not okay. Deep breath. Anyway, Mildred, who has previously claimed that she doesn't want to stick her nose into the Laura and Remington relationship, sticks her nose into their relationship by asking, "How did Mr. Steele put it?" And Laura proudly tells Mildred that he doesn't know yet. This is her decision. It's up to her to tell him how she feels. And Mildred is intrigued and, envisioning a Charlotte Knight or Dark Prince scenario, blurts out, "So you're going to jump him."
And I mean, okay, so this conversation that Laura and Mildred are having right now kind of circles back when she's arguing with Mr. Steele. And we'll obviously get to that when we get to that. But I do find it interesting that when she says, this is my decision, she's right. And at the same time, Mr. Steele's right later on when he calls her on it and says, shouldn't I have any say in the matter? Because on the one hand, she's been on the one hand, she's been the holdout so far, right? Like he's been the one pursuing her, and she's been the one holding him off. And you know, as a good human, he's respected her when she said no, right? I mean, he pushes the envelope a little at times, but like he's always kind of known where the line is, right? So in that context, she's right in that it's up to her to tell him when she's ready. But
Right.
this reads more as I've unilaterally.
He's got no choice in the matter. Yeah, it's going to happen.
and I mean, we know he wouldn't say no, but at the same time, I don't know, the way she kind of says it rubs me the wrong way a little bit. Like, he doesn't know. I've made this decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
yeah.
maybe tell him before the first kid comes, you know? Like,
yeah. So anyway, after Mildred blurts out, "So you're going to jump him," Laura tries to class it up a bit, saying that she's sure when the moment comes, it will be romantic as only Mr. Steele can make it. In the meantime, Steele is in a very intense clinch. He's in a very intense clinch with a dark-haired Frenchwoman who has the dagger in hand.
So is this necessary? Like the kissing, him helping out his old friend, sure.
Aren't the French people all about the kissing? I mean,
that's taking a French kiss to a whole new level, right? Like this is back with Millicent Fairbush territory in the sense that she may have kissed him, but he's certainly not pushing her away. He seems to be thoroughly enjoying this. So
yes,
that's kind of that's. But Laura's statement rubs me the wrong way. This rubs me the wrong way because again, they've been together for all of season 2. It's been established they are in a relationship. He's helping out his friend. That's fine. She might have kissed him. That's fine. But a person who's in a committed relationship would immediately push that person away and say, "I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm with someone else." Instead, he's just like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Like, yeah, not cool.
Well,
dude.
I guess when in France, do what the locals do. So, yes, anyway, so he is intense in it. He's deep in it, but then he does break off the kiss and tells her that it's time to go. Eventually, yes. And of course, the only reason he does is because it's time to go. So the woman tries to kiss him again, but he stops her, telling her to take off. She playfully sticks her tongue out at him, then rides off on a scooter. Steele takes a deep breath, one of those with, "Wow, that was close," sort of deep breaths. And, that one kind of takes in an attempt to calm themselves after something which has been anything but calming. And then he glances at his watch. No comment.
No.
Back at the theater.
Staying quiet.
Back at the theater, Laura's looking for Steele without success. But not to worry. Ron, the youngish man who had been directing the choir, calls out to Laura. He approaches, gives Mildred a mildly hesitant look, threes a crowd, and then begins stumbling over his words in an attempt to ask Laura out to dinner after the reception. Laura, with a somewhat saccharine smile and a touch of a saccharine tone in her voice, tells him that she has a date, as she continues looking around for Steele. Well, Ron suggests that maybe they could have a drink together the next day. And apparently unable to think of a graceful way out of it immediately, Laura nods her head and tells him, yes, that would be nice. Now she has time to make sure she's busy tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, thinking that he's been successful, Ron makes his departure. And as Laura continues to look for Remington, Mildred sidles up to Laura and in a conspiratorial tone asks, if you don't want him, can I have him?
Oh, I love Mildred. I love how she's just like, it doesn't matter that this guy's quite a bit younger than her. She's just like, I'll take him if you don't want him. Oh, Mildred.
Word comes to mind.
Get your vacation
anyway. Yeah. Anyway, next we see Steele racing through the streets on his motorcycle, periodically looking at his watch. And then the performance of the Glee Club continues with I've Got Plenty of Nothing from Porky and Bess, wherein Stephanie screws up the lyrics as she mimes. And the woman just behind and to the right of her, as we view the scene, isn't even trying. I mean, it's just like opening her mouth, closing her mouth, making these mouth gestures that have nothing to do with nothing.
Yeah. For all the time they spend on these scenes, and I know that it's more to do with the DVD issue, but like, oof.
You know, I was thinking about this. They could have really solved this problem very easily because obviously the music was recorded ahead of time and they were miming to it.
Yeah.
They could have hired an actual choral group as extras, paid them as extras. They wouldn't, not a sound would have to come out of their mouth that would be recorded, which would change their status and give them more pay. They are just non-speaking extras and they just mime it and they would have got it right.
Yeah, that's true.
Stephanie screwed up the lyrics. Maybe they could have done another shot of that one bit. But I mean, come on, guys. Wouldn't have been that hard. I mean, if I can think of it, why couldn't you? You're the experts. You get paid the big bucks to... Anyway, Steele continues racing through the town as the choral group has progressed to Old Man River. Now, there's no telling how long the second half of this performance was, but if it follows the normal course for such things, it was probably at least 45 minutes, which means that from the interval until the next scene when it's over, at least 45 minutes. What has Steele been doing for 45 minutes? Because I can't. What?
I think saying goodbye to Joelle took up a good chunk of that.
Well, well, no, except he said goodbye to her as they were beginning.
Oh, that's true.
Well,
yeah. I don't know.
Well, of course, we don't know. Old Man River could have been, or I've Got Plenty of Nothing could have been late in the second half. Yeah, you're right. He could have been saying goodbye over and over again.
Over and over, repeatedly. With his tongue. I guess he usually say good. Never mind.
Anyway, when it's all over, Laura and Mildred are standing around waiting for Steele, who, as Ron observes, has apparently stood her up. Well, just then, Steele comes striding up, calling out, "There you are," as if he had merely gotten separated from them, and he's been looking for her. When Laura demands to know where he's been, he over-energetically says that he was so deeply moved by the final number that he had to go out for a breath of fresh air. Yankee Doodle Dandy? Yes, stirring rendition.
So here's another question that I have with this, because if they've done multiple performances, I can't imagine the set list would have changed. And surely if they've done multiple performances, he's seen at least one of them.
Yeah, you would presume.
You would think if that were the case.
At this point, he's still stirred.
He'd remember. Maybe he's still, but you'd think if that were the case, he'd remember what their last song is. Just a thought.
Yeah, and he would probably have had a better excuse than stirring rendition, because I mean, after about they've been on tour for 2 weeks. After about the third or fourth time, it's no longer a stirring rendition. It's now like, okay, is this thing about over?
Silly song to end a concert on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, especially in Europe.
Yeah. Talk about not reading the room, you know.
Well, you know, when you're up on stage and the lights are in your eyes, you can't even see the room. Never mind reading it. Anyway, sorry, bad joke, dad joke. Steele offers Laura his arm and suggests that they should leave as they don't want to be late for the reception. And as they leave, Laura, who obviously hasn't bought anything he's been selling, gives Mildred a look as they leave. And the look says, "Forget everything I said. I'm going to kill him."
Except she doesn't.
So,
yet.
Well, no, not yet. She's going to build up to it. Anyway, Mildred holds out her arm to Ron, who, with a resigned look, takes her arm, and they leave together. At the aforementioned reception, Ron, Mildred, Laura, and Remington are speaking with Inspector Vouvray of the French police. Ron, trying to be go ahead.
The name of Vouvray and Lebray.
Mm-hmm.
They're so similar. It got very confusing for me. That's all.
Okay. That's all I can say. Well, it would have been worse if they looked alike. But anyway, where was I? Yes, Ron, trying to be a dazzling conversationalist, Yeah, he fails miserably.
Yeah,
he comments
it's
to
not very
Inspector
good.
Vouvray that it must be exciting solving murders and such. And oh no, says Vouvray, not many murders to solve here. Not like in America. Here it is like mostly what you say, small potatoes. You know, people hitting each other, auto crashes. Anyway, Vouvray would rather talk about Steele's work. In fact, when he heard that Steele was here, Vouvray decided that this is a man he must meet. And of course, as Vouvray is saying this, Laura has a somewhat malicious grin on her face. It seems that she is looking forward to Steele being made uncomfortable by Vouvray. Yes. Anyway, so Steele tells Vouvray that he would be disappointed. After all, solving the most sensational cases of national importance becomes, as you say, a tad routine. And then, just then, there's a voice from across the room calling the inspector, who excuses himself. Mildred, who seems to be of the opinion that she has secured the rights to Ron, begins flirting, telling him that she is fascinated by the way he conducts the glee club. And Ron, not recognizing Mildred's intent and thinking it's a genuine compliment, eagerly responds that he didn't know that Mildred was such a music lover. Mildred laughs, saying, "Who's talking about music, eh?"
So I have a funny story here that this made me think of. I took music all throughout high school. I took instrumental, vocal, everything there was to take. I took it. And one of the classes I was in, my music teacher was teaching us about conducting and the certain movements that you make in order to indicate to your band, your concert, whatever. And she wrote on the board the words flicking action. Only the L and the I were really close together. And she wrote them in capital letters. Okay. So capital L, capital I, really close together, looks like a U. Flicking action. The whole class burst out laughing when she wrote it, right? Everybody and she turns around super confused and what? And we're pointing at it on the board and we're killing ourselves laughing. Flicking action. She looks back, she looks back, must have dawned on her what it said or what it looked like. She turns back and she's like, "You all have dirty minds." So I'm thinking that Mildred wants to hear about Ron's flicking action.
Yes. And, I won't say it. Anyway, after her comment about who's talking about music, Mildred suggests that they go get some more bubbly. Ron grimaces, realizing that what Mildred has on her mind isn't exactly conversation about music, or maybe not even conversation.
Yeah, but he goes. That's what kills me. He's like, he looks like a condemned prisoner. He could just politely excuse himself, but he just goes like,
well, maybe that's his life up to this point. Anyway, as Mildred and Ron depart, Steele gives Mildred a hurrah, telling Laura that he thought he was going to need a iron bar to pry away. Telling Laura that he thought he was going to need an iron bar to pry that aging altar boy away from her. Laura suggests that they leave, and Steele is confused, noting that they've just arrived, and wouldn't that be a tad rude? And with a hint of impropriety in her manner, she says, "Yes, it would." And Steele, realizing that the rewards for such rudeness may be far greater than disapproval of the rudeness, smiles and agrees. Yes. He may be slow on the uptake, but he gets there eventually.
Except he doesn't.
Oh, well, yes.
Not in
he
this
doesn't.
episode
Anyway. Yeah. Behave yourself. As they begin to leave, Vouvray returns, as do Mildred and Ron. Vouvray makes his apologies, saying that he must go. There's been a robbery, a very big robbery. And, of course, Steele feigns a sense of shock. But at the same time, he's very disinterested.
Yep.
Laura asks what it was that was stolen, and Vouvray says that it was the Habsburg dagger. And Steele explains that the Habsburg dagger is a jewel-encrusted gift presented to the Habsburgs in the 16th century. Vouvray commends Steele on his knowledge. Ron says he thought the dagger was a myth, and Vouvray assures Ron that no, it is real. And as those who have died trying to obtain it can attest, the dagger is priceless. Laura asks, well, what was it doing in Cannes? Vouvray says that, well, it seems that somebody who owned the dagger came here from Hong Kong to sell it to somebody in France. And then he comments that it sounds more like one of Steele's cases than one of his own. And Steele admits that the crime does have a certain flair to it. Yeah. And Vouvray drops a not so subtle hint saying that if only we had an expert like Mr. Steele around to help.
Yeah, real subtle.
Ron, sensing an opportunity to draw Steele away from Laura, helpfully suggests that Steele help the inspector with the case. And Laura, of course, sourly says that she doesn't think that's such a good idea. And Vouvray admits that the thought had already crossed his mind, but being that Steele is on a holiday, well, how could he ask? And of course, thank you, Mildred. She gleefully shoves Steele into it, saying that he could find that overgrown butter knife in no time. Overgrown butter knife. Wow. So in a flat tone, Steele says it's a shame they have to be back in Los Angeles in 2 days. Important business, you see. And Vouvray, ignoring that, is delighted to have Steele on board. After all, 2 days with the great Remington Steele is better than none. And as Vouvray drags Steele away, Laura gives an awkward laugh as she tells Ron and Mildred that she's sure that Mr. Steele would want her along. And a disappointed Ron watches as Laura leaves. His disappointment turns to self-pity as Mildred suggests they go dance. Yeah.
I think Mildred could do better, is all I'm going to say.
Yeah. But, maybe that's the best of what's at hand.
What's around, yeah.
Anyway. Anyway, Vouvray and Steele are outside the apartment building where the crime took place. And as the inspector repeatedly tries striking matches in order to light his pipe and repeatedly failing, he asks Steele for his thoughts. And Steele vamps, saying that he's just as baffled as the inspector. The inspector surmises that the thief was clearly a professional who has left them no clues. And as he throws a failed match into the garbage can and right on top of the black dickie that Steele has discarded earlier. Yeah. A voice calls out to the inspector. It's one of his detectives. The man approaches and he and the inspector move off. With the inspector otherwise occupied, Steele reaches down, grabs the dickie and throws it behind the garbage can, hopefully out of sight. A few moments later, he follows in the direction of Vouvray went with his man and finds the inspector alone. The inspector has finally succeeded in striking a match, so then lights his pipe. He comments apologetically about the interruption. Bureaucracy, it's the same everywhere. And then he suggests that they've done all they can for the evening. Well, Laura throws a wrench into that. She walks around the corner holding the dickie. And notice that Steele slaps his hand against the building in frustration.
Yeah.
Not much for playing it close to the vest there, are you, Steele?
No.
Anyway, Laura shows it to the inspector, saying she found it in the alley. Steele facetiously asks if she started collecting men's clothing. As he fondles the cloth, pretending to inspect it, Laura observes that it looks brand new and was recently discarded. It had rained that afternoon, but the dickie is dry. She suggests that it could have been part of a disguise, placing it around her neck to illustrate. Steele nervously grabs at his throat, as if trying to dislodge something on which he is choked. Laura observes that there's a label on it from a local shop and suggests that at least it's something to check out, and Vouvray commends her on her work. She adds that she had spoken to a woman who lives across the alley who said that there was a motorcycle parked there that evening about the time the robbery had occurred. Again, Vouvray commends her work as excellent, then tells Steele that his assistant, has obviously learned a great deal from the master. And with obvious insincerity and nervousness, Steele is forced to concede, calling Laura his prized pupil, as she looks on at him with a look of I'm not sure how to categorize that look. So, yeah, but she's not really happy.
No, she is not impressed.
No. Back at the hotel, Laura and Steele are walking down the hall. Laura has been talking. She comments that the inspector is quite a character, but Steele doesn't answer. He apparently hasn't heard anything she said. His mind seems to be miles away. Until Laura falls silent. And then he realizes something in the environment has changed. The noise has stopped.
Yeah.
and he says, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. And she dismisses his inattentiveness. They continue to walk, and after a moment, he looks at his watch, tells her that he will see her in the morning. She grabs his arm, spins him around, puts her other arm around him, and then plants a big, long one on him. And after a moment, she breaks the kiss, suggesting that it's a bit early to turn in. After a slight hesitation, Steele says he has a bottle of Dom Perignon in his room, and would she? And she kisses him again and says, it sounds lovely.
That's a pretty impressive bottle to just have in your room. Like, who was he going to drink that with?
Good question. Yeah, but it may not have been their best year, so he uses that for his own personal drinking, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, when you're not entertaining, you can get away with the second shelf stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, they walk down a few more doors, and at the door to the room, Laura takes the room service card from the knob, looks at it, and then comments that it's so convenient that one can order breakfast without ever having left bed. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the penny has to have dropped now for Steele. Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, he grins as he pulls out the key to the door. So yeah, it's dropped, and it's hitting the walls of the well as it's heading toward the bottom. Anyway, they enter the room, and there's a short hallway, as common with some motels, before they get into the main room. Steele closes the door. They move toward the main area, grinning, knowing grins at each other. And as they enter the main sleeping area of the room and look toward the bed, Steele suddenly turns away as if trying to make an escape.
Yeah.
And Laura freezes, staring daggers.
Yep.
Well, it's the young woman on the scooter to whom Steele had given the other dagger.
The long goodbye.
Yeah. She's got Steele's dagger. Laura's giving her a dagger.
Yeah.
Only it's not. Yeah. Anyway, she's on the bed. When she sees Steele, she gets up and runs toward him, throws her arms around him, pleading, I need you so desperately. Laura, with a blank look on her face, tears up the service card.
So did you read through the whole script for this episode?
I read through parts of it. I did not read through the entire thing. No.
So it's pretty much the same. There's only one bit that I noticed is different, and that's here. And this actually kind of bugged me because the scene just switches in what's aired, right? And we don't see the next scene. He's going into LeBray's house, and we don't see what the exchange was between him and Laura. Like, did he just walk away? What happened, right? Because obviously she's going to be ticked off, and he must have made some sort of excuse to leave. And so this always sort of bugged me because there was it just ended. And then all of a sudden he's at Henri's house, and I found myself wondering, well, what happened? In the script, she throws herself at him, and Laura paces, and then she's he leaves, I guess. And then it says fade in, Remington and Laura's hotel. She's in her room, pacing furiously, and she's saying to herself, don't fall apart, Laura. Do something constructive. Break something. So she picks up a vase, then decides it's too expensive, puts it down, then reconsiders, then says, what the hell? Picks it up again, throws it blindly. I guess it sails out an open window, and then she sticks her head out to see what damage she's done, and instead she sees Steele and Joelle climbing into a car together. And then she says, I'm not going to take this, and storms from the room and charges out just in time to see them drive away, calls for a taxi, and then Ron shows up. And he says, "Hi, Laura. The darndest thing just
I
happened.
did
I was out for a walk and someone threw a vase at me."
Actually, now that you're saying that, I do remember reading that because I remember about Ron throwing.
She goes, "Oh no," and he says, "Just missed. Say, it looks like he could use a drink too." She looks off in that direction, realizes he's disappeared, and then she says, "You know what, Ron, you're right." And then they walk to the hotel to have a drink. So, not that I like the fact that she goes back to the hotel with Ron, but at least it kind of clears up how Steele got to Henri and Joelle's place and what happened with Laura, because as it airs, it just switches, and I found myself going, "Well, how did he get there? Where's she? What happened?"
Yeah.
Also, I really love the idea of her picking up the vase, deciding it's too expensive, putting it back down, and then going, "No, you know what? Screw it." And then nearly hitting Ron in the head as she does so. So I kind of wish they kept that in.
Yeah. There's other scenes earlier back at the concert that are extended as well. So
yeah, I mean, I
obviously
I get
a time
why they
thing.
took that out. It was a time thing, but it would have been nice, even just for the continuity purpose of, okay, now he's over here. How did he get away from Laura? What what happened? So
yeah. So anyway, Steele is at the home of his female friend and her father, the names of which are Joelle and Henry Lebray. He has a bandage on his head. They are telling Steele that an unidentified intruder surprised them and stole the dagger. Steele is incredulous at the impossible situation he's been placed in, telling the two of them that he's been deputized by the police to investigate his own burglary, that Laura is going to expose him if he can't stop her, and in the meantime, he has to find out who stole the dagger from them. Well, he does the one thing no one should ever do.
Never do this.
He says they can comfort themselves in the knowledge that at least things can't get any worse, at which point they immediately become worse.
You deserve what happened.
3 large angry men burst through the door with a gun pointed at Steele and his friends. Back in the motel, it's the next morning. Laura has been calling Mr. Steele's room, but of course, he's not there. She gives up, telling the inspector that, well, Mr. Steele must already be out following his own leads. And we can see that the inspector has been there for some time. Either that or he's very bad at keeping his pipe lit, because
he's terrible. Everywhere he goes, he seems to have, like, I get that it's the purpose of it is to help Laura figure out that he's the one responsible, but how many matches? He must single-handedly keep the match industry
company in business. That's right. Yeah, because he's just lighted just managed to get his pipe lighted and discards the match on the floor. And there's already at least half a dozen discarded matches down there.
Super rude to just drop everything on the floor. I mean, come on. You can't find a garbage can. Not cool, dude.
Apparently not. But, people... cigarette butts, matches,
I find
in
that
a store,
very
a restaurant, wherever, a lot of them will. They just on the floor.
Yeah, it drives me nuts because I'll see people roll down their windows in their cars and like toss the cigarette butt out the window, and like, yeah, I don't know. I just find that very rude.
So anyway, Vouvray says that he understands, saying that a man such as Mr. Steele works best alone, eh? No Laura counters. He's just got a bad habit of being mysterious about his partners.
Yeah.
About his partners? Whoa. That line bothered me. He's got a bad habit of being mysterious about his partners, not toward his partners. Now, is that intended to be a reference to the woman from the previous night, or just residual anger over his tendency to disappear without an explanation and to be involved in some questionable situation which negatively impacts Laura and the agency without her knowledge?
I think it's a bit of both, but it's a bit silly to say it in front of Vouvray. I mean, we know he's the one responsible, but if he wasn't, it would be a bit compromising to say that, because if he's a investigator and she works for him, then there wouldn't be any need to be mysterious about who you were. I don't know. It just,
it's just a weird line. Yeah. Anyway, Vouvray's assistant, Lieutenant de Guiche, arrives with news. They have found a black motorcycle exactly as Mademoiselle had described, abandoned. It was rented by a Jean Roby, and the address on the rental agreement was fraudulent. Yeah, and of course, at the name of John Roby, Laura's attention is piqued, though she doesn't seem to know why, and she casually questions the lieutenant to confirm the name. Bouvray asks about the black Dickie, and De Guiche says, well, inquiries are being made. The lieutenant departs, and then Bouvray excuses himself as well, asking Laura to urge Mr. Steele to please stay in touch.
I gotta say, like, it's really sloppy of him to use the Dickie thing was sloppy. The use of the name John Roby is sloppy, especially if he took her to see that movie. I think she says it last week or something. Like,
yeah, 2 weeks ago, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's if you're he's gone behind Laura's back and it blows up in his face later. So obviously he was not intending for her to ever find out about this. So if you're if you're going to do something like this, somebody as good as he's supposed to be should be better at it. There shouldn't be an item of clothing left laying around, and he shouldn't have used a name that Laura is going to pick up on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very careless of him. And you'd have thought that at this point he would have come up with some new aliases to use.
Yeah, well, he can come up with an alias on the spot. We've seen him do it, right? So there's no reason. Yeah. I mean, we know that he likes to use names of characters from movies, but Laura knows that too, and he knows Laura knows that. So,
yeah,
not smart.
Yeah, it's one of those. I don't want to be caught, but I guess I do. Anyway,
it almost feels that way. I mean, maybe not with the authorities, but with her, because these are two things that she would easily, and she does, find. And she finds a piece of clothing. She asks about the motorcycle. She recognizes the name, like all very easily avoidable things.
Yes. Anyway, Mildred appears, eager for gossip, but then Ron appears. He's got 2 tickets for the harbor cruise for himself and for Laura, except that Laura pawns him off onto Mildred. As Laura wanders off, somewhat distracted with her thoughts, well, Mildred is hot to trot with Ron, who, after a moment's hesitation, seems to accept the situation, hesitantly at first, and then seems like with a casual acceptance. So I think,
like, why not?
I think Ron's kind of getting into the Mildred groove there. Laura is wandering through the streets, lost in her thoughts and pondering the name John Roby. Eventually, the light bulb comes on.
Yep.
Duh.
Stephanie's acting here, though, is brilliant. Like, her face just contorts. It's great. Yes. I really like it.
Yeah, she goes over the deep end on that, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, as she figures it out, she sees the man she calls a louse running for his life across the beach. She tears out after him, hollering at him to wait. She catches up with him eventually and demands that he stop and explain himself. He'd love to, but the 3 men chasing behind him want to kill him. Laura doesn't have a problem with that.
No,
only that they'll have to wait their turn. Yes. So anyway, arguing that they would be better off continuing their conversation elsewhere, he grabs her hand, leads her to the pier, and then down the pier to a boat. As Steele begins untying the boat, she shouts, "This is larceny!" She looks back at the 3 men rushing toward them, decides that perhaps a bit of larceny is better than the alternative, so she joins Steele in the boat.
Were the keys just in it? Was the boat on? Like, how did... He just seems to start it up and drive away, so...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
All right.
Who's going to steal a boat? You just leave the keys in it. Yeah. Anyway, as they're getting ready to take off, one of the men jumps on the boat. Laura is about to punch him, but Steele punches the gas, sending the man flying backward into the water as his associates steal another boat to continue the pursuit. Another boat with the keys left in it.
Yeah, with the keys left in it. And, yeah, exactly.
Anyway, as they attempt to make their watery escape, Laura begins berating Steele. John Roby, indeed. I would have expected a little more originality.
Right?
And Steele unsuccessfully tries to play dumb, but of course Laura isn't having it. To Catch a Thief, Cary Grant, Grace Kelly, Paramount, 1955. Grant plays a retired cat burglar named John Roby. Steele says he's impressed. But the attempt at flattery and deflection isn't going to work, as Laura reminds him that he took her to see it 3 weeks earlier. And that's typical of him to use that sort of a name when renting a motorcycle and trying to conceal the fact. Yeah.
Not very well.
Yeah. He continues to feign ignorance of her accusations, but she continues to pile on, accusing him of stealing the Habsburg dagger. And in one last vain attempt at playing dumb and failing, Laura angrily realizes that instead of doing something for the sake of being nice, his insistence that she join the Glee Club tour was all about getting to a position where he could steal the dagger. No wonder you were so insistent on me joining the Glee Club tour. All this time, I thought you were being nice. Insisting that she join the tour, being nice. There's something about that bothered me. It's good puppy. Here's a reward. Here's your special treat. Yeah. What were your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if I got that from it, but this whole, I don't know. I would think that if he's insisting she join this Glee Club tour or something, that alone should have been an indication that something's up, right? Like he kind of always has an angle. And so it feels a bit naive to think that he was like, no, you should we'll go to Europe and you can do this Glee Club thing. Not that he's a bad person, but just this is the kind of thing that would normally bore him to tears. So, yeah. And also, him continuing to play dumb at this point is only making things worse for him. It's bad enough.
But on the other hand, what's that old saying? That's my story and I'm sticking to it. It's not necessarily the bad story that gets you in trouble. It's the giving up on it that sometimes gets you into trouble.
Well, but she's not stupid and he knows that. And
yes, that's true.
Figured it out and he knows that. So to continue to pretend it's not the case is an insult to her and probably only makes her angrier. At this point,
the anger's escalating.
Yeah. Granted, they can't sit down and have a heart-to-heart at this moment, but the appropriate response should have been, listen, I'm sorry. I will explain everything, but right now we're kind of running for our lives.
We got a more important thing to take care of right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But instead he still plays dumb. And of course that makes her even angrier. And it just,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Laura, her anger continuing to escalate, demands that he admit that he stole the dagger. Steele insists that it's not what she thinks. Okay, yeah, it really is what she thinks. But
he stole the dagger. That's what she thinks. He did it. I mean,
yeah. But he does, as you said, point out that they have more pressing matters to concern themselves with at the moment, such as living to fight another day.
Yeah.
Or perhaps what he should have said was that he was trying to help them live so that they could fight another day with each other.
Yeah, that's kind of what I assumed he meant. So,
well, you could take it either way because the old saying is, better to run away and live to fight. Yeah. Anyway, so keeping an eye on their pursuers, Laura informs Steele that it appears that one of them has a gun. Steele corrects her, saying they all have guns, big guns. When Laura finally asks who they are, Steele, somewhat ungraciously, though understandably, says it's nice of her to finally inquire.
This is funny. I mean, the fact that she's so angry at him that she doesn't clock that they're being chased by three men with weapons, and she's finally
very, very angry. Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. He's not kidding about the trying to kill us thing. Okay.
So he tells her that they call themselves the Palermo brothers, except that they're not from Palermo and they're not brothers.
They never explain this. This drives me crazy. I want to know the story here.
Well, we don't get the story of the name. We get their background later on, but yeah, we don't get the name.
Why do they call why they're not from Palermo and they're not brothers, yet they call themselves. So I want to know. Here's another
they had to call themselves something. So.
How did the Palermo brothers get their name? Go. All right.
Yeah. So anyway, he says they are three of the deadliest thieves on the continent, and they are chasing him because they think he has the Habsburg dagger. And Laura angrily shouts, "But you do have it." And Steele responds that, well, someone stole it from him, but that's a rather complicated story.
Yeah.
And Laura, not at all satisfied by his attempt at a brief explanation, tells him that he should consider the Palermo brothers that he shouldn't consider the Palermo brothers his biggest threat, because if they ever live through this little escapade, she's going to kill him herself. Yeah.
I like that.
So Steele is steering toward a point on the coast with a prominent lighthouse standing on it. And when questioned, he admits that he knows the coast as a product of his misspent youth, and then asks for her purse. Next, we see the Palermo brothers navigate around the point with the lighthouse in pursuit of what turns out to be an empty boat, although they don't yet know that. Laura and Steele have dived overboard, remained submerged long enough. How long were they under that water?
That's what I wondered that. And I wondered, so this might be silly, but as somebody who carries a purse around, I wondered, did Laura take all her money and credit cards out of the purse first? Did she put them in her pockets? Like, what's happened to the stuff?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's...
No, she just carries an empty purse around for no reason.
Where did all her stuff go that's in the purse? I'm assuming she needed some of it.
Yeah. No, you carry an empty purse around just in case you need to tie up a steering wheel on a boat.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's so obvious. Anyway, so they remain submerged for long enough for the Palermo brothers to power past them, pursuing the empty boat, which of course is being kept on course by Laura's purse wrapped around the steering.
And they're not that far behind. They would see that there's nobody in the boat. That just seems silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, look, the boat's driving itself and the people are gone. What happened?
I don't know, but let's go catch the boat.
Let's catch the boat. Yeah. The Palermo brothers,
anyway,
deadliest thieves, but not too bright.
Well, that could be one of their trademarks as well.
That's true.
Anyway, Laura and Steele make their way to the shore, and then after doing so, Laura demands the whole story. Steele attempts to get away with the excuse that he has a pressing appointment, but she tackles him, telling him that he's not getting away this time and that she's tired of his games and demands the truth. Okay, but it'll be easier to explain if you'll just come with me. And she says, no tricks. Well, Steele takes her to the home of Jolie and Henri, who greets Steele with a relief, but then begin explaining the situation. Back when Henri's name wasn't Henri and Remington's wasn't Remington Steele, they had done some smuggling together around the Mediterranean. Steele was a young but superb young man with boats. That was when they first encountered the Palermo brothers, who were at that time small-time operators and fellow craftsmen, in Steele's words. Although Henri calls them competitors, the brothers Palermo have moved on to bigger and better things, as has Henri, who has bought a hotel. And the hotel has, over the years, developed a reputation for, let's call it, discretion.
Yeah.
As a result, it has been the site of many, many transactions of a highly sensitive nature. And they're very, very quick to assure her that they were all perfectly legal transactions, just transactions in which those involved would have preferred to keep a low profile. Yeah, okay, well, I'll believe the second part. I'm not sure I believe the first part.
Yeah,
but anyway.
If you believe the first part, you've got some swampland in Florida for sale.
Yes, cheap. And it comes with a bridge, too.
Yeah.
The Habsburg dagger was going to be sold at the hotel, but the Palermo brothers got wind of it and threatened Jolie if Henri didn't help them steal it. So Henri called Steele, who said they should steal it first. Then, after things had settled, return it to the rightful owner. Then, of course, the invitation came for Laura to join the Glee Club tour, and it was just perfect how it worked out for their cover, just wonderful. So Steele stole the dagger, gave it to Jolie, but when she got home, her father had been knocked unconscious. Somebody grabbed Jolie and stole the dagger. But it wasn't the Palermo brothers, because they came looking for it later that night. They threatened Henri, Jolie, and Steele, but Steele managed to get away when Henri created a diversion. So naturally, the Palermo brothers began chasing Steele on the assumption that he had gotten away with the dagger.
So, aside from the fact that he didn't tell her about what he was doing, this isn't much different than some of the other heists they've pulled for the greater good. I mean, we think about Hounded Steele.
Yep.
Thou shalt not steal. I don't know. Something about this kind of bugs me in the sense that, and to be fair, when they have the argument later, she points out it was a dumb plan, and it kind of was. But I don't know. I don't see why he couldn't.
I wouldn't say it was that dumb, but I mean, it was dumb in the sense that it didn't work.
Well, yeah, but I just mean, like, I don't know why at that point in their relationship he couldn't have said something to her. Like, hey, I need your help. It's like my friend is being threatened. I need to do something. And maybe it wouldn't be a heist, but they would have worked at it together. Like, it just feels there's no narrative or dramatic tension necessary for him to lie at this point. At least about this.
That's true.
It feels like the writers needed a reason for her to get ticked off at him, and they created this case or this situation where he's lying to her and doing a heist. But they've done heists. When Mildred's life was at stake, they broke into the diamond exchange. They've broken into places all the flipping time at this point. They've got crime clothes. They have clothing for the purpose of doing crime. So I just don't see. I see why she's angry, because it's not necessarily that he lied to her, but it's that he didn't need to lie to her. I think. I don't know. It feels contrived. I like the rest of the episode. I really do. This is a good opener, even though it's not supposed to be, but it's a good season opener. I just feel that there needed to be more of a reason why he couldn't tell her. And
maybe in some earlier version of the script, there was something and it just got excised.
Yeah, it could be.
You know,
I don't know. Maybe it would have been more logical if it had come up while they were there. If it wasn't he engineered the whole thing to get to Cannes so that he could do this, but they went to Cannes, him, maybe hoping for a romantic rendezvous, her doing this Glee Club tour. And then at the very last minute during that last performance, his old friend approaches him and says, hey, I need your help. I need it right now. That would make sense, because then he wouldn't have time, to tell Laura about what he's doing or to think it through. It would have accounted for the sloppiness of the heist and her anger, because she would assume that he brought her there with the intention of doing this, as opposed to a moment of opportunity. That's how I would have written it.
You should be a writer. Anyway, after the story, Laura sums it all up by saying that if they don't retrieve the dagger immediately, either Inspector Vouvray will expose Steele as the thief, or the Palermo brothers will chop him up into tiny pieces. Big graphic.
She says that with very, almost glee.
Yeah.
Little tiny pieces.
Well, Laura begins to leave, to head back to the hotel to change before they begin their hunt for the dagger. Henri interrupts her departure by telling her that he thinks it's beautiful for her to sacrifice herself for her partner. But Laura coldly says, no, not her partner, her ex-partner, because when this case is finished, so are she and Steele. Yeah. Back at the hotel, Steele is at the door to Laura's room, and before he can knock, she is out, silently walking, not even walking, just striding past him. And from the angry look on her face and her aggressive stride, she is definitely not in a good mood. She's definitely not in any mood to put up with him. He follows her to the elevator where she pushes the down button. Then he pushes the down button because, the more you push it, the faster it gets there, right? Then in an aggravated tone of his own, he calls the situation ridiculous, pointing out that they are not going to solve anything if they don't even talk to each other. And if she's going to be so hostile, why doesn't she just let him fend for himself? And she responds that she would, except that she's got her own career to think about. And it wouldn't look very good if her alleged boss ended up in a French jail. Disgrace, she says, can be contagious. The elevator doors open and Laura steps in. Without following her in, Steele then asks her why she thinks he's going to get caught. She responds by asking why didn't he trust her? And then, of course, as the doors close, he slips right through them. Kind of like the Millennium Falcon on the way out of the Death Star. Anyway, sorry. Continuing their conversation in the lobby, then outside, Steele asks if had he told her about his plan or told her about Henri's problem, would she have approved of his plan? And she says, of course not. And Steele takes this as meaning that she wouldn't have approved getting involved. But no, what she means is, as you said, it was a stupid plan, as demonstrated by their present circumstances.
Yeah, see, I don't think she's necessarily wrong here, because now, to be fair, neither of them know that Vouvray has set up this whole situation. So it feels like no matter what they did, they would have been manipulated in some way. But she's not. I think that this exchange means, or what she's trying to say is that if he had come to her, they would have figured out a plan together, as opposed to him going off half-cocked and.
Well, she calls the plan stupid, and Steele disagrees, and I think he has a point here, saying that, okay, it was an excellent plan. I won't go so far as to say it was an excellent plan, but I think it was a decent plan, and he would have been in the clear if she hadn't been so intent on playing Nancy Drew, which, as you said, Vouvray drew them into this, but yeah, she was the one who found the Dickie. Vouvray, clueless. I mean, this guy, he's definitely not the brains of the operation.
No, but at the same time, it's frustrating because he's saying it's an excellent plan and he would have been in the clear if she hadn't been so good at her job. Again, if they had done this together.
No, there's a difference between being good at your job and doing your job when it's not called for.
True, but I mean,
or when you're not.
He left evidence behind at the scene, evidence that
That's true.
Laura would easily find if it was her case that she's working, and he used a name that she's clearly going to clue into. So,
yeah, I'm not saying that it was a brilliant plan. I just, the basic plan was sound. He just made some stupid mistakes along the way.
Yeah, which I don't think he would have made if they were both doing it together, or if he had come to her in the first place and said, a friend of mine is in trouble, he needs my help. This is what I'm thinking. And she might have said, no, that's dumb. Let's do something else. But either way, I think if they had worked it together, which I think is what she's trying to convey here and not doing a very good job at because she's mad, they would have had a better plan, or it would have gone better or differently or whatever. But either way, like, she sees this as obviously him going behind her back, making her look stupid. And she did look stupid because she's solving the crime that he's committed and putting her career in jeopardy because he's not brought her in on this, which he could have.
Yeah. Well, anyway, after his comment about her playing Nancy Drew, she comments somewhat sarcastically, asking if it's her fault that the Palermo brothers didn't fall for his scheme. And Steele suggests that at the moment he might rather be dealing with the Palermo brothers than her. Wow.
This is aside from the fact that I maybe have some issues with how this argument is set up. This feels very much like a married couple bickering, and I really.
Anyway, so Laura points out that he broke their trust and their tacit business arrangement by saying that and she says that they're supposed to be partners and that as partners, they are supposed to share information and trust one another. Mildred appears and she is a chipper mood. Mm-hmm. One almost might think that she had a good time the previous night.
Well, I don't see Ron, so maybe he's still recovering.
Yeah. Steele doesn't seem too happy to see Mildred, which, of course, Mildred notices but misinterprets, saying that she won't intrude on romance. Laura asks about Ron. Gone somewhere. Steele asks if Mildred had been to the gardens. Lovely vista. Beautiful walkways. No, that's for lovebirds like you two. and they continue to try and get rid of her. How about the museum? You've seen one museum. You've seen them all. You haven't been to the casino. Use my personal line of credit.
No.
Try
Steele,
the baccarat tables.
This is a bad plan. Don't send her to the casino.
Well, he does, and he takes her arm and directs her away toward the casino. Mildred protests that she doesn't know how to play baccarat, and Steele dismisses her by saying, you'll learn. After they get rid of Mildred, they walk off, the argument continuing, with Steele finally venting the frustration that has apparently been building up for some time, saying, this partnership you keep trumpeting about has a rather lopsided lean to it. I couldn't come to you in my hour of need because I knew that if you disagreed, there would be no room whatsoever for discussion. This is a partnership? How do you think that makes me feel? Well, Laura counters that it's a limited partnership in as much as it's her agency. And Steele, he should have thought of this before he said it. It came out of his mouth, because I think it's a foolish comment. He counters that it may be her agency, but it's using his good name. And of course, Laura picks up on it, saying that he doesn't have a good name, good, bad, or otherwise. She gave him his bloody name. But Steele isn't done, insisting that he's lived up to the name of Remington Steele. And not only that, he's maintained the deception, been a steady partner, putting his hide on the line with hers, going on for, 3 years now? So why does he get the feeling that whenever he leaves her sight, he has to ask permission? Laura argues that she is convinced that they have a democratic procedure. Steele counters that their procedure is democratic only if that is defined as Laura always being in control.
So this is
Go ahead.
I like this argument because both of them are right and both of them are wrong. And I think it's interesting because he says to her that he counts in all this. Or sorry, she counts in all this. And then he says he wanted to include her, but he knew how she would react, right? Which is essentially like saying if it's a kid that, just steps out of line with a parent, well, I wanted to ask permission, but I knew you'd say no, right? So
I went and did it anyway.
I went and did it anyway, which means two things. One, he screwed up by doing something that he knew she would have issues with, but also that she has not created an environment between the two of them where he felt he could talk to her and figure it out together. And I think he has a point, but I feel like he's also, when he says, using my good name, and he makes a comment about he's been a steady partner going on 3 years, and he still feels that when he leaves her side, he has to ask for permission. It feels like he's making a really solid point here, but that he's making it to deflect from the mistake he made. Well, like this is obviously something that's bothered him for a while. He's made comments about this before, about how she has to be in control, how he feels he's not an equal, that she doesn't view him as an equal. And in any other place, it would be, he'd have two legs to stand on when he brings it up. But here it feels like it's, oh yeah, well, you treat me like a child. And he's right, but he's kind of saying it to just take the heat off.
Stop acting like one.
Because he did something stupid. He did something childish. And so now they're, like I said, it's really fascinating because they're both right and they're both wrong. She's right that it is her agency, and anything that he does is going to reflect poorly on him if he's caught. And she has a right to be angry because he went about this behind her back and didn't trust her. But he also didn't feel like he could because she's not given him an indication that she sees him as a partner. So
I had similar comments, but in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
My first opening summation was the fact is that they're both arguing in bad faith.
Yeah, kind of.
First of all, it is Laura's agency. So for Laura to argue that their arrangement is based on some sort of democracy is dishonest, because it isn't. And even if it was, in the case of a tie, she wins because it's her agency.
Yeah.
And second of all, they aren't partners, at least not in the sense of equal partnership. So for Remington to argue that they are is to ignore that it is Laura's agency and that he is at most a junior partner. True. Yeah. He is the front man and the one people look to when asking for help or looking for revenge. But he's getting compensated for all of that with a lavish lifestyle. So, yeah, they're both arguing in bad faith. They're not being honest with each other. They're not being honest with themselves about what they're, I mean, yeah, they're just throwing stuff out there to, like you said, deflect.
I think are things that they've wanted to say that they've both been, that's been building up for both of them. It's just, yeah, you're right. It feels like an argument in bad faith, because I don't think there's anything wrong with her saying, we're not partners. This is my agency, my business. And him, I don't think there's anything wrong with him saying, well, I want to be considered an equal. If they were at a point where their relationship was to, say, take things further and they did get married for real, not whatever we see in season 5, you would think that a logical step would be to bring him in on the agency, give him partial ownership. So it's not just her business. At the moment, though, that's her name. And she's right when she says that he doesn't have one. He can easily disappear into the night and reinvent himself, and she'd be left with the consequences. So, yeah. But it does feel like they're both kind of trying to take the heat off.
I think Laura needs to acknowledge that he is a partner, but he also needs to acknowledge that he is not an equal partner.
Yes. I think that's what I was trying to say.
He's a junior partner, and Laura, when he comes to Laura with something, she needs to consider it, but he also needs to accept that she's the final word.
Yeah.
And I think those are the two problems. She doesn't want to admit that he's a partner in any capacity. And he doesn't want to admit that she has the final word.
Yeah.
So anyway, the argument veers from bad to worse when Steele follows up his comment about only a democracy when Laura's in charge by bringing up the previous night, saying, you decided without discussion that we were going to finally consummate our relationship, and I'd like to have some small say in that matter. Laura counters that she thought that he was pretty involved. Mm-hmm. Steele says that he feels he's being treated like an errant schoolboy, as you'd said, who constantly needs a guiding hand, that no matter how many times he's proved himself, he always gets that same veiled look of suspicion that says, what's he up to now?
Dude,
Laura comes
This
back.
is the wrong time to bring that up. Like, this is, again, if we go back to that parent-child analogy, oh gosh, Mom, you're always looking at me like I've done something wrong. You're always suspecting me of stuff. Well, yeah, I did stuff, but like, you're always suspecting me of stuff.
That's like a scene from Home Improvement where Tim accuses Brad, I think, of doing something. And Brad says, well, it's not fair that you always assume that I did it. And Tim says, well, did you do it? He said, yeah, but it's not fair that you assume that I did. Well, kids, well, I just want to be, I want to be treated like an adult. Okay, well, an adult says when you've been told no, you don't do it.
Yeah.
You don't go ahead and do it anyway, claiming that by acting childish that you're being an adult.
And it's interesting that he brings up the night before and says, you just unilaterally decided it was time to consummate our relationship. And she makes the comment of, well, isn't that what you wanted? And he says, yes, but you've always got to be in control. And this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the episode, that this is interesting because up until this point, he's been pursuing her. He's made it clear what he wants. So in her mind, it would be logical to assume that she is the one that has to tell him that her feelings have changed, because he's never gone back and said, okay, well, no, it's cool. I don't want to have that relationship with you now. They haven't broken up. So, but it's interesting that he expresses anger over it. I don't know if it's just simply an overall anger at her need for control, and he's just throwing this into the mix, but it's not helping his case much, because pointing out, well, you wanted to sleep with me last night. How dare you? Well, okay. I don't know what point you're trying to make here, man, but it's not working for you, because don't worry, she won't be presenting you with that offer again anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, after his comment about the errant schoolboy, and Laura comes back with, can you blame me? I've got a couple of notes here. It says, on one hand, he's got a point, because just because he would have been involved in the result of the decision, boinky, boinky, doesn't mean he was involved in the decision. So I think he's got a point. But on the other hand, he misses the point. Whose definition of proving oneself counts here?
Yeah.
Because he says, I've been proving myself. And he's saying it from the perspective that he thinks he's proven himself to his satisfaction, but his opinion isn't really the one that counts here. If he's trying to prove himself to Laura, hers is really the only opinion that matters. Of course, she might have been moving the goalposts, maybe having set them back farther for him than she would have someone else. But, it's still her opinion that matters.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you said that about the decision process, it's one of those things, because it's not like he couldn't say no, right? If she had said to him that comment about, oh, you can look at this breakfast menu, you can order breakfast without ever leaving the bed, it's pretty clear what she's proposing to him. And if he didn't want to, he could simply say, no. That's always an option, right? So
yeah, but I think that's I think there's two things I'm talking about here, though. The boinky, that's definitely the thing here. But the proving himself as far as the agency goes.
Yeah. And you're right too, because you're right. He's proven himself to his satisfaction. But what is proving himself? I haven't committed any larcenies in the past 2 years. Well, whoops, we just broke that rule. So,
Well, but it doesn't matter if you are setting. When you create the standards by which you judge yourself, and you demand other people accept your standards.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
If you're trying to prove yourself to them, they set the standards. Now, that doesn't mean you can't negotiate those standards, particularly if,
for sure,
as in this case, Laura has moved the goalpost because she's got a higher standard for him than she would anybody else in a similar circumstance. But yeah, your opinion doesn't matter here if you're trying to prove yourself to that person.
And
their opinion is the only one that matters.
If she's sitting there saying to him, I can't trust you, and you've just shown me why, because you've done this thing behind my back.
Hello.
He's clearly, if I've proven myself, well, I don't know, because we're currently on the run from the Palermo brothers and the police. So,
really. What have you proven here?
And literally, he says this after he says, I couldn't go to you for help, so I lied to you. That's not a good excuse. Like, I couldn't go to you for help, so I just went ahead and did it anyway. Like, it's better to ask forgiveness and permission. And again, not that he should have to ask permission, because if they are partners, that there should be some degree of trust where he could have said, I have a friend who's in trouble. I need to help him. Here's what I'd like to do. What are your thoughts? Obviously, that's a bigger problem that they have. But so is the fact that she doesn't trust him yet. And he keeps, unfortunately, proving
her lack of justification, her lack of trust is justified. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's the part about what he does, because he's posing as Remington Steele, anything he does reflects on the agency and drags Laura into it. Yep. And so he basically dragged her into a situation without any kind of a heads up. That's not.
She has no choice but to help him, as she said, because at this point it's her agency, and it wouldn't look good if her boss ended up in a French jail. So it is very unfair of him to. It's kind of like if you have, a married couple and one spouse racks up massive credit card debt. Technically, that's their financial problem, but it's impacting the other person's credit because you're a married couple. And it puts them in a position where I either have to help you out, bail you out of this financial jam that you've gotten yourself into, or I take the hit too.
Yeah. Yeah. I want your help with something, and I'm going to ask you for your help, but I've already set the situation up in such a way that you can't say no.
Yeah. Which, Laura's going to be mad. She's going to be real mad at that, because it means she still has to help him. She has to bail him out, which at this point she probably doesn't want to do, but for her own livelihood, she has to. And he's backed into a corner, I think, and he's flinging this stuff out, which I do think has been building up for a while and has been a problem for him and is justifiable, but
this is not the way to handle it.
No.
This is not the way to have that discussion. Yeah.
No.
So anyway, after this argument has been progressing up to this point, Steele says he doesn't know how much longer he can live with her attitude. And Laura decides and pronounces that they've made progress. They finally agree on something, and that it's obvious that their differences are irreconcilable. And it was a mistake to think that the partnership could involve mixing business with pleasure and that somehow they could ever make it work. And in response, Steele yells out, "Beau geste!" What? Laura thinks he's making a movie reference having to do with their argument, but no. Their walk has taken them to an overlook, giving them a breathtaking view of the city and the harbor, which is what has led to Steele's non sequitur, because far out in the harbor is a yacht, the Beau Geste, which Steele says hadn't been there the day before. So regardless of who actually swiped the bloody dagger, at least now they know for whom it was stolen.
Do you know what it means?
Laura, of course.
The name of the boat?
Just a joke?
No. The name of the boat in French.
Yeah.
Means
just
nice
a joke?
gesture.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
Yeah. Beau
Okay.
geste means it's nice gesture.
Oh, as opposed to a rude gesture.
Isn't that a weird name for a boat? Yeah. So, yeah, I just think that's a weird name for a boat.
Well, I mean, better than one-fingered wave. Laura throws up her hands in frustration, asking herself rhetorically when she lost control of the conversation.
I like that.
And my note here is, did she ever really have control of the conversation,
exactly.
or had it just been careening wildly from one direction to another?
It was like a ping pong match.
Yeah. Anyway, Steele begins to explain. There are 3 collectors who've been wanting the Habsburg dagger. One is a Russian named Kemedov, who has in the past had a business relationship with the Palermo brothers, leading Steele to suspect that Kemedov may be somehow involved. The second is the Japanese merchant named Sarabachi, named after a famous mountain on an island in the Pacific. No, the island was probably named before. Yeah. Anyway, through his present financial situation, Sarabachi, his present financial situation eliminates him from consideration.
It's interesting that he knows
Steele,
that.
Yeah.
He's still keeping tabs on.
Yes.
All of it.
Yeah. And the third is a South African playboy named Freddie Smith. What a amazingly original name, who made his fortune running guns to anybody with money, and who just happens to own a yacht, which just happens to be named Beau Geste. Well, the sound of squealing tires catches Steele's attention. He turns to see a very red Lotus Esprit Turbo headed straight toward them. And it's interesting that this vehicle is called out specifically in the script.
Yes. It is.
The script identifies it as red and specifically as a Lotus Esprit Turbo. I wonder if somebody on the staff wanted a chance to drive that thing.
I mean, if I'm going to get run over, I'd like that car to do it because that's a nice car. I don't want to get run over by like an ugly car, you know?
Well, no, I'm thinking somebody on the staff wanted to drive it. And so if they had it there as part of the show, it's like, hey, can I take this out for a spin at lunch?
Hey, at least since they're on location, Laura's rabbit is safe.
That's true.
There's nobody there to blow it up, drive it into the ocean, knock it off a cliff, or any of the other ways that poor car could get damaged. It is sitting at home waiting for her return.
Well, you hope it's at home. Maybe somebody's stolen it and is doing something weird with it.
It could be, yeah.
Anyway, Steele grabs Laura and throws the two of them out of the way of the speeding vehicle, which races off at high speed. Laura and Steele recover and call over to a taxi driver who is parked across the street and says, "Follow that car." The driver initially refuses, saying he's off duty, finished, but Steele pulls a bill out from his pocket and holds it up to the man's sight. And apparently the denomination of the bill is sufficient to make it worth his while to extend his workday just a bit.
Laura's bad French here kills me. Like, she's attempting to plead their case in very terrible French, and I'm just cringing as I listen to it. It's worse than mine, which is saying something. So.
Well, her French is better than mine, so because I don't speak it. Anyway, they take off after the suspect car, although it seems that the cabbie has just concluded his shopping at the live chicken market.
Yeah, why is there a chicken? What? As funny as this is, why?
Why?
Why is there a chicken? Did he have a previous fare that forgot their chicken?
People do leave strange things in taxis and Ubers and Lyfts. So yeah, it's
Have you ever had
possible,
someone
I
leave a
guess.
chicken in your Uber?
Not a chicken, no.
Okay.
No. Although plenty of them very rude people leave their garbage.
Oh, see, that's just
Yeah. Anyway, the chase takes them through the narrow, curving streets of the town. They navigate through traffic jams, onto sidewalks, and around other cars until they finally nearly run into another car. And that car stalls, blocking the road. As their quarry is getting away, Steele and Laura spot a bicycle built for two, leaning against the near...
That's what it's called.
Fine, get picky. It's leaning against the nearby wall, conveniently, so they hop on it. They hop out of the cab and steal the bike.
And
okay, one more criminal charge to add to their...
They steal the bike and they promptly manage to hit the audience over the head with their relationship metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean, they're riding a bike where they have to use teamwork and they can't seem to figure it out. I mean, anyway.
Yeah. Well, with Laura out front steering. Yeah. With Laura out front steering and Steele in the back, hanging on for dear life.
Is he riding B-word here? Does this count?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's not a motorcycle, so you can do whatever you want. Anyway, Steele's in the back, hanging on for dear life as they are going faster and faster along the downward trajectory of the streets because no brakes.
That's probably why the bike was just left laying around.
They navigate between pedestrians and carts until their wild ride ends with them being launched into the air as the result of the rather unfortunate encounter with the vegetable cart, which then is followed by them landing in the middle of yet another vegetable cart. And although I can't say that it's been proven with absolute certainty, I'm reasonably certain that neither Stephanie nor Pierce did that particular stunt.
Probably not.
As they are getting to their feet, a policeman comes over to help. And as he does, they can hear on the officer's radio that Inspector Vouvray has just issued an order for the arrest of Remington Steele. Steele chuckles nervously, and then they spot a small car pulling up not too far away, and who should step out but Inspector Vouvray. The officer runs over to greet the inspector, which gives Laura and Steele the opportunity to make their escape.
Yep.
Back at the casino, it seems that Mildred has learned how to play baccarat and has become a star player. And she is dressed to play the part.
She's
fancy silk
looking good.
Fancy silk dress bedazzled with an ostentatious pin, smoking a cigarette through an exaggeratedly long cigarette holder.
Why does Mildred smoke?
Apparently when you're at baccarat and winning, you do.
Since it looks good for the scene, I guess, because it's never noticed any time, like if they're wanting it to look like something fancy, they always have that, what do you call it, the thing you stick the cigarette into.
Cigarette holder is all I know.
Cigarette holder instead of just using your fingers, because that, I guess, looks low class. I don't know.
Well, you know what, maybe this would explain all those long lunches.
Could do, yeah.
She's out sneaking really the smoke. Anyway, that just made me think. Should I tell it? I'll tell it. You know, one of the reasons why so many people in the military smoke is because when you're going through basic training, people who smoke get a smoke break, and the people who don't have to do chores inside the barracks, clean up, that sort of thing. So people start smoking to get a smoke break so they don't have to do the chores.
This was kind of the same for when I worked at Zellers, that it was perfectly acceptable for cashiers and people on the floor to kind of like step out back for a 5-minute smoke break. Same with restaurants and stuff like that. And yet you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to take 5 minutes and get some fresh air. That's not allowed. But if you're polluting your lungs, go for it. It's quite frustrating because you do sort of think to yourself, well, maybe I should take up smoking so I can get some extra some extra breaks. The lung cancer, whatever, it's worth it.
So anyway, a phone is brought to the table. It is for Countess von Krebs.
I love that she answers the phone, Countess von Krebs.
The call's from Laura, and they have a job for Mildred and a shopping list that includes a regulator and weight belts.
Yeah.
Next, we see Laura and Steele clad in scuba gear. They're swimming toward a boat, temporarily named the Beau Geste, because, yes, we can see where they slapped white tape over the stern to hide the boat's actual name.
I mean,
but
we find out later that Mildred spends the entire night in the casino. So when does she have time to get them all this stuff?
Who knows?
Okay.
Maybe she had enough money there. Maybe she paid somebody to go do it.
Okay. But yeah, you're right. The boat does look really, which kind of makes you wonder. The name was obviously intentional, because otherwise, if they're using a boat on location, why not just use whatever name that boat had? Why rename it?
Because of the movie reference, I guess. But you know what? We're going to pretend it's 1984. We're watching on an old style, comparatively small screen TV where it wouldn't be very noticeable. But still, professional pride, guys, professional pride. You're getting paid big bucks to do the job, so let's show a bit of pride in it.
It's the boat that gets
anyway.
things done.
Yeah, the boat gets things. No, the prop department that gets things done.
Yeah.
Anyway, they climb up onto the stern of the boat, and they're on apparently a lower deck. Laura compliments Steele on the move, referencing Goldfinger in the, or Steele references Goldfinger as the inspiration for the move. Then they start to strip off wetsuits, which reveal fancy dress clothes underneath.
How? These wetsuits are not forgiving. How did you fit an entire tux underneath there? And her flowy top? Not to mention her makeup's perfect and their face is totally dry and her hair is dry and his hair is dry. I know the wetsuit was kind of over their head, but later on when they swim back, their hair is wet. So I don't know what's going on here.
Details. Yeah. See that? I'm waving my hand. hand.
Okay. All right. Fine. I do like her shirt.
So, yeah. Anyway, Steele suggests that Laura stay put, that the situation might be trickier than he thought, but she refuses to go along with his idea, saying that why should he have all the fun?
Well, also, why would she come with him if she's just going to stay put on the boat?
She's a lookout, I guess. I don't know. Steele declares her the most obstinate woman he's ever met, to which Laura responds with that classic response to all such put-downs. Flattery will get you nowhere. Inside the yacht, there is a fancy dress party going on. Laura and Steele join the party. Steele suggests that the dagger is probably in Freddie Smith's stateroom, and getting them down there with no one noticing is Laura's job.
So for those of people listening in the UK, when he says fancy dress party, he means like formal wear, not costumes. Fancy dress in the UK means like a costume party.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
that would be Laura appearing in the bunny suit and Steele as Sherlock Holmes.
Okie dokie.
Yeah.
So anyway, behind them we hear a voice address.
Translate for those across the pond.
Yes. What's that old saying? English. The Americans and the English are two people separated by a common language. Yes. Anyway, Behind them, they hear a voice addressing them, saying, "I don't recall seeing you two on my guest list." Laura and Steele turn around. They give each other kind of a tense look, and after a tense moment, Laura smiles at the man, Freddie Smith, while Steele turns away, avoiding further eye contact for the moment. But it's all good. Smith admits that he really doesn't handle the guest list himself, and he doesn't know half the people who are there, even though it's his party. Laura introduces herself as Frances Stevens, stealing her sister's first name.
Yep.
And introducing Steele as the infamous John Roby. Insincere flatteries pass between Freddie and Laura, with the former declaring, with an undertone of challenge towards Steele, that he intends to monopolize the latter's time. Steele wishes Freddie better luck than he's had lately, looking straight at Laura as he says it. But she ignores his gaze. And at Laura's prompting, Freddie declares that he will start her tour of the yacht at the bow.
Kind of a low blow on Steele's part, because she was ready to advance their relationship.
Yeah.
He screwed it up. Like this one is not a situation of her holding out on him. She was ready to go, and he screwed that up. So
yeah, well, he's still mad though.
Yeah.
Anyway, Steele slips down to Freddie's stateroom to begin his search, and it takes him a few moments to find a hidden safe. But as he's looking there's a noise at the door, and Steele ducks away into the shadows and into a side room. The noise is Freddie and Laura. It seems that Freddie has decided to give Laura the deluxe tour, which naturally includes a visit to his cabin.
He didn't wait. He was just like, yeah, here's the other end of the boat. Now let's go to my room. Okay.
Yeah. Once inside, spotting Steele trying to hide and realizing she has to buy an opportunity for him to get out, Laura throws herself at Freddie, literally as well as figuratively.
Yep.
And I assume that this is extreme devotion to her profession, not any sort of attraction to Freddie, because
yeah, clearly.
I can't imagine most women would look at him and get all gooey.
Ew, no. He's definitely not. And this, I think that Steele being petulant about this bothers me, because Laura is the one putting herself in an extremely vulnerable situation by kissing Freddie and leading Freddie on. I mean, if Steele ends up leaving the room and then she's left to kind of fend him off and then get out, which could have gone sideways if he hadn't let her go. And so not only is she taking a personal risk, she's having to make out with someone who is clearly not someone she's attracted to. And he gets real childish about it. And it's like, of the two of you, one of you is putting yourself in danger and into a situation you don't want to be in. The other's just jealous and mad. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of almost comes up later. And yet it kind of doesn't. I'm not sure if it does or not. We'll get to it. Anyway, Freddie, apparently not being bashful at taking advantage of opportunities. After Laura throws herself at him, he kicks the door closed, picks her up and tosses her on the bed, and then pounces on her.
Literally just jumps.
Yes. Overeager there, that Freddie. Makes you wonder how lucky he's been lately. Anyway, Steele, looking on from his hiding place, mutters, "Disgusting."
Yeah, like
Laura,
she's doing that so you can get out with your hide, buddy. Just chill.
Yeah. Well, Laura keeps trying to signal him to get out, but he mouths that he hasn't found it yet. But of course, that's irrelevant now. He finally takes the hint as Laura keeps Freddie entertained, and he slips out of the room, quietly closing the door behind him. Then he knocks on the door. Extremely annoyed at the interruption, Freddie gets up to answer the door as Laura sighs in relief. Of course, it's Steele. He tries peeking in at Laura, but Freddie keeps moving to block his view. Finally, Steele tells Freddie that there's been a slight altercation at the bar and Freddie is needed to sort it out. Freddie turns to Laura, tells her that he'll be right back and to don't lose that feeling, and then heads up toward the scene of this. And then he heads up toward the scene of the supposed trouble. Laura waits a moment until she thinks Freddie is out of earshot, Then she runs over and opens the door for Steele, who is none too happy with Steele's performance, asking if her libido got in the line of duty.
That's rude.
Yeah.
That's rude. She's clearly not doing that for fun. He knows that. So yeah.
Anyway, as Steele begins working on the combination of the lock of the safe, Laura explains that they were halfway to the bow when Freddie stopped and said, "Why don't we start in my stateroom?" So what was she supposed to do? Steele snaps back that she managed to hold him off for 2 years. The least she could have done was hold Freddie off for 5 minutes. Let the argument begin. Or resume anyway.
Keep getting lower, right? Like, dude.
They could get lower.
Yeah, well, okay. True.
Laura responds that surely that's not jealousy I detect. We're talking business, are we? I think your whole problem is you don't know the difference between what is professional and what is personal. Steele pointedly replies, I don't know the difference. And Laura, wanting to avoid the subject, just says, just finish the job. I think the accusation might have gotten a little too close to home.
Yeah.
Anyway, Steele holds up the dagger saying it's done, but Laura can't resist just one more dig, sarcastically asking, so what do you want? Applause? She leaves, slamming the door behind her. Steele is closing up the chest, which is where the safe has been hidden.
Yeah.
When she rushes back in a panic. He's coming.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't have taken him that long to go upstairs, find out nothing's wrong, and come back.
Yeah. So she hops onto the bed, resuming her previous position, and Steele resumes his previous position in the corner. Coming back in, Freddie says he doesn't know what her friend was talking about, as there was nothing going on that needed his attention. Laura, glancing at Steele, giving him a wink, says he was probably looking for me. He's the jealous type. Hello. Childishness, holding on line 1 for Laura Holt.
They're both being
Freddie asks
at this point, like, neither one is being their best self.
Yes. Freddie asks Laura what type she is. She sits up and says she's the adventurous type, grabs Freddie by the arm and pulls him down on top of her and begins making out with him. And all the time that she's talking to Freddie, she keeps giving Steele dagger looks. Hello, childishness, still holding on line 1 for Laura Holt.
Well, I think this is more, I think the dagger looks is less about her being petulant at this point and more about like, okay, now I got to make out with this guy again. Can you please just get out? Like, stop standing around.
You think so?
Yeah, because I mean,
I don't know.
She's having to do this again with this guy that she doesn't want to, and she's already ticked off that he's accused her of enjoying herself. So I don't know. If I were her, that's what I'd be mad about.
Well, it's for that reason that I think it's not. It's for that reason that I think that she is doing it just to at him, you know.
I would find, if it were me, I'd find other ways of getting back at someone than making out with some gross looking South African playboy.
Yes, given a little bit of rational thought, you're right. But I mean, they're not rationally thinking. To me, this seems like what she would have done. But anyway, that's just me. Despite her nasty looks and her attempts to infuriate Steele, she begins to roughly gesture for Steele to get out. I'm sure Freddie considers her emotions just part of the fun.
The kicking of her leg, he's, a little weird, but...
Oh, she's a wild one. Woo!
Really into it.
Steele casually strolls out of the room, having picked up a flower somewhere along the way.
Yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I don't understand the significance of it. It's weird. It's there. It's just weird. Anyway, after he's out of the room, Laura suddenly sits up, disturbing Freddie's plans, and says, oh my gosh, Mr. Roby's anti-seizure medicine. I forgot to give it to him. And then Freddie, apparently one to never let the health and well-being of another person get in the way of his amorous desires, says, oh, that can wait. But she insists that no, she has to do it now, lest Mr. Roby interrupt them at a inopportune moment.
This is the weirdest excuse.
Well, I mean, it works. It works. And she leaves, and Freddie is left there to tend to himself.
I mean, I have to think there was a better excuse, because I can think of two off the top of my head. Time of the month.
Well, except that she probably wouldn't have let it go that far if that was the case. Anyway.
She could claim she forgot. Who knows? But just anti-seizure medication.
Hello, if a man had said that to a woman, oh, you forgot you're having your period, that man would have a couple of black eyes, a split lip, and maybe a concussion.
That's my point. She'd have an excuse to just haul off, and anyway.
No. My point is that nobody would buy that at this point. Anyway.
I don't think anybody would buy the anti-seizure excuse either, but yeah.
Well.
Like, why does she have?
But anyway.
Why does she have to administer it to him? Anyway,
because he's absent-minded and she has to remind him. Anyway, as Laura and Steele are back at the boat, putting their scuba gears on, Steele expresses concerns. Now, I'm unclear on what Steele says here. It sounds as if he says, "I'm beginning to worry."
I thought he said I was beginning to worry.
Well, that's how it is in the script. But to me, as I'm listening, it's not. His enunciation isn't really clear, and to me, it sounds as if he might have been saying, "I'm beginning to worry," and which, depending on which one it is, really changes the meaning of the whole situation. I'm beginning to worry could be about the possibility that Freddie Smith will find out sooner than they want about the missing dagger, and it will cause problems.
Yeah.
Or it could be about his and Laura's future, giving her behavior and attitude, especially given the behavior with Freddie and the childish attempts to hurt Steele. I was beginning to worry could mean that he was getting to be worried about what Freddie might be doing to Laura, or with Laura,
she wasn't able to get out.
Or what Laura might have been doing to Freddie, or with Freddie, And so, so depending on what he said, the meaning of Laura's response about me or about Smith or me changes again, depending on what Steele actually said. So, yeah, somebody's got better ears than me. I'd like to know.
I'm pretty sure when knowing that's what it's in the script, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure when I watched it, I heard I was beginning to worry. Mm-hmm. And her response about Smith or me, challenging him as to like, well, were you worried that Smith might have been hurting me, or were you worried that I was dallying with him for fun?
Yeah. Yeah, I knew what the script said, but to me, it still sounded like he said, "I'm beginning to worry." But anyway, after she asks her question about Smith or me, Steele doesn't answer her question, but he grabs her and pulls her to him and gives her a hard kiss. In the meantime, down in his stateroom, Freddie suddenly sees the secret drawer of his chest has been pulled out. Rather careless of Steele to leave it out. Smith rushes over. Yeah. Freddie rushes over, reaches in through the drawer, opens the false bottom to discover that the dagger is missing. And as we see Laura and Remington swimming back towards shore, we hear the anguished scream of Freddie over the top. Once on the shore, they begin to climb the rocky face of the presumably not too tall cliff. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't think they would be climbing up something that's hundreds of feet tall, but it's tall enough that it's a climb, but it's short enough that it's apparently not too much of a climb. But as they reach the top, we first see a gloved hand reaching out to help. And then we see that the hand is attached to the Palermo brothers. So at gunpoint, they demand the dagger. Then, having secured the dagger, they turn and walk away. That surprises me, given how Steele described them as being some of the most violent men in Europe. That's not what I would have expected.
It is a bit odd. especially since they have guns and they know that Steele was the one who you'd think they'd want to eliminate all loose ends.
Yeah. Loose ends and things that could lead to them. Yeah. Anyway, as the Palermo brothers walk around the rocky portion of the cliff that is down the beach a ways, we suddenly hear the sound of automatic gunfire. Laura and Steele run to the corner and see a Jeep driving away and the Palermo brothers on the ground dead. Steele checks, but the dagger is gone. Steele walks around for a moment, surveying the scene. He determines the spot that the killer must have stood. Laura joins him, and as Steele is surveying the surrounding area, Laura begins looking at the ground beneath them. And that's when she spots it. Over half a dozen burned and discarded Styx matches.
See, and
like
this
one
is
would
why you
use to
shouldn't
light
litter.
a pipe.
This is why you shouldn't litter, because if you decide to commit murder,
it might give you away.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. But the good thing about wooden matches is that they are biodegradable. So there is that.
So,
anyway.
Okay, well, I guess that's one good thing. Mother Earth is saved.
Anyway, next we are at the home of Inspector Vouvray. There is a rough banging on the door. He goes to the door and opens it. It is Laura and Steele dressed in clean and very high-end clothing. Notice I didn't say fancy clothes. And dry hair. Well, it's been a little while. They could have dried it off enough that it would be okay. Anyway, Vouvray invites them in. He tells Steele that he was devastated, just absolutely devastated to have to issue a warrant for Steele's arrest. And had Steele come to turn himself in? Mm-hmm. Steele says no. He's there to clear his name. What was that?
Oh, I laughed.
Oh, okay. Steele says no. He's there to clear his name. And more than that, Inspector, they know who has the dagger, Laura adds. Vouvray says, oh, that is good news. Steele says that first he does have a confession to make. He admits that he did steal the dagger from the hotel, as he puts it, but the plan was to return it. But most importantly, somebody stole the dagger from himself and Henri Lebray.
So his excuse is, okay, so I did totally commit the crime, but I was going to return it.
It's okay because somebody else stole it.
Somebody stole it from me, so they're really the ones. I mean,
that's right.
The one that orchestrated this, but if he wasn't, that'd be a really hilarious confession.
Anyway, at this point, Laura takes up the plot, saying that someone had to have. Laura takes up the plot, saying that someone, referring to the person who stole it from Henri and Steele, had to have extremely good connections with the criminal element to even know that the dagger was being brought to the Riviera. And furthermore, that this person had to have some means of monitoring the conversation. Well, wiretaps, bugs, that sort of thing. And of course, as they're telling the story, Vouvray hesitantly interjects with repeated, He then tells them that this news is so exciting that he must get a notepad, lest he forget. He steps into the next room, pulling the door closed behind him, grim look on his face. He reaches down, pulls open a drawer in a desk, and removes a pistol. He turns back to the door, opens it, and begins to walk through, starting to raise his pistol as he does, but walks into a scene of two guns being pointed at himself.
Did they, I assume they took those off the Palermo brothers?
Because they didn't have that, or they just found an all-night pawn shop and bought a couple of midnight specials.
That would be really difficult in France.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, they probably they could have gotten from the Palermos, I guess. Although I don't know if they had just killed somebody. Well, no, they didn't kill anybody. They could have. Okay.
They had guns though. The Palermo brothers had guns.
Yes, they definitely did. Yeah. Well, wait a second. If guns, are you saying guns are illegal in France?
Well, I know I'm just Googling it right now, but I know that the handguns are definitely illegal in Britain. And so not even the police carry them. And just a quick Google here says that they're not banned, but they are really restricted. So it would be difficult to buy a firearm easily in France, from what I'm looking at.
But criminals have no problem getting them, right?
No,
Gotcha.
I mean, if they're, I'm just saying that they wouldn't be able to just go and buy a Saturday night special from a pawn shop. It's going to be.
Well, how did the Palermo brothers get theirs? Maybe Steele and Laura got theirs the same way.
I'm assuming that the Palermo brothers probably smuggled them into the country somehow.
Well, maybe Steele and Laura smuggling guns.
Yeah, but why would they smuggle? They barely bring the agency gun out of their own office, much less overseas.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is the first time we've seen Laura actually drawing down on someone. I mean, we know that she's got a gun back at the office. She's had it with her before, but I don't ever recall her doing more than carrying it in her purse. So this is a first. Anyway, Vouvray moves to set his gun down on the mantle of the small fireplace by the door. And, of course, as he does, Steele moves over to secure the weapon as Laura continues to hold a bead on the inspector. Steele slips back into the back room to recover the dagger as Laura reveals that it was the matches that gave the inspector away, and how cold-blooded it was of him to calmly smoke a pipe while waiting to murder 3 men.
That's kind of cold-blooded.
Well, yeah. Laura and Steele continue to give us the rest of the story, explaining through the dialogue that the inspector had learned that the dagger was being sold, knew that the Palermo brothers had approached Henri, and then the inspector had tapped Henri's phone, thus learning about Steele's plan. He then contacted Freddie Smith, offering to supply his long-sought prize. Long-sought prize. Yes, long-soughted. No, offering to supply his long-sought prize. And the price would be enough for the inspector to retire on. He enlisted Mr. Steele's so-called help in order to keep him close and monitor his progress. But when Steele and Laura began looking at the beau geste, he decided that they were getting too close and tried to run them down. Failing that, his fallback plan was to make Steele the prime suspect. Then there is a knock on the door. It is Lieutenant de Guiche. Laura steps over to let the lieutenant in, telling him that they have the dagger and that somewhere in the apartment is the submachine gun that killed the Palermo brothers. De Guiche seems to have been, at least on the one hand, disbelieving of the accusations made by Laura and Steele because he expresses dismay at it being true, and that it sickens him that the inspector could be so cold-blooded. But on the other hand, he seemed to have been willing to give Laura and Steele the opportunity to prove it, as evidenced by the fact that he let them come here with their plan, unaccompanied up to this point. But all is not as it would seem.
Nope.
For as they are walking outside toward the cars, Laura and Steele are leading the way and start to pull away from De Guiche and Vouvray. But De Guiche directs them to his car, a very red Lotus Esprit Turbo. Laura and Steele hear a click of a gun behind them. Vouvray orders them to turn around and place the weapons on the ground and then kick them toward himself. Laura and Steele slowly and carefully comply. Vouvray says that he would have liked to have done it all by himself, but unfortunately for them, he needed help. He then orders them into the car. Wait a second. How's that going to work?
I was wondering that myself.
If Steele is in one and Laura is in the other, what's the plan?
That was one of my questions was, how are they all going to fit in that car? My other question was, if you're going to kill somebody with a car, if you're going to run somebody down with a car, maybe don't do it in one that is so noticeable and that you own. Yeah, that's not a bright idea. Like, you would think you would steal a car or use a car that is so ordinary and nondescript that you wouldn't even notice it. Whereas that is a fairly noticeable car.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how they're all going to fit in it, though. Not a clue.
Well, unless they were just going to put them in the car, shoot them or drug them, and then shove the car off the cliff. That's the only thing.
Maybe. But that's a waste of a
But
really
anyway,
nice car.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is. It
killing
is.
them too, but like the car, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, well, you know, after they kill him, if they shoot him, the upholstery's ruined anyway, so you might as well get rid of the car. Anyway, Laura and Steele turn and begin to walk toward the car, but Vouvray and Duguiche seem to have forgotten about the dagger. Steele carefully reaches up to pull it out of his jacket. He spins around, yelling at Laura to duck as he does. Then he throws the dagger at Vouvray, hitting him. Vouvray falls back, knocking Duguiche down. Steele runs over to Duguiche, grabs his gun before the man can get up and recover it. And in the meantime, Laura has grabbed one of the guns that they had discarded earlier from the ground. Steele then orders the inspector to hand the dagger to himself as Laura triumphantly crows, "Justice prevails after all."
That is such a corny, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff Malvoy, I love you. That's terrible.
Yeah. I guess he'd just been reading some 1940s or 1950s superhero comic books.
It reads like something George Lucas might have written for the first three I don't like sand. It gets everywhere. Anyway.
Anyway, it's the next day. Laura and Remington are walking through the hotel lobby, and we learn that Henri and Jolie are now out of hiding, and Steele has managed to secure his first finder's fee since becoming Remington Steele, which he pulls out to count for apparently the umpteenth time.
Yeah.
And they meet Mildred and greet her, asking what she's been up to, apparently not noticing the man accompanying her.
Yeah.
And in a somewhat chagrined tone, she tells them that she's been at the casino. Steele says, "All night?" "No, since the previous afternoon." Somewhat panic-stricken at the possibilities, Steele asks, "How much did you lose, Mildred?" "Oh, I was way up there for a while, boss. I really was." "How much, Mildred?" "Then when it was all gone, I thought, if I could just have one more hand." Not getting an answer from Mildred, Steele asks the man next to her, "How much?" The answer comes back, 224,000 francs. Laura and Steele are aghast. Mildred questions Steele, "That's a lot, isn't it?" Laura holds out her hand to Steele, who quickly puts the envelope behind his back. He begins shaking his head. No, but Laura insists. Finally, he slaps the envelope into her hand. She reaches in, pulls out the bundle of money, pulls off 2 bills from the bundle, and then hands the rest of the bundle, minus the 2 bills, to the man. After he leaves, Laura hands Steele the 2 remaining bills with the pronouncement, "I believe these belong to you."
So I just did and this could be wrong because I just did a quick Google, but
Okay.
I tried to Google the rate of inflation plus the monetary exchange for 200,000 francs in 1984 versus now. And it looks like it'd be about $600,000 that she lost.
Well,
line of credit.
That would be quite a bit if that is accurate. However, keep in mind that Google has recently been recommending that people use glue to keep their cheese on their pizza.
Okay, fair. But one thing I can say, like, obviously the franc doesn't even exist anymore. They use the euro, but the exchange for the last, and this is Canadian dollars, so I don't know about American dollars, but it's roughly like half. So I always lose money every time I exchange from Canadian to UK money. I usually get about half of what
and you lose when you do it back, don't you?
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
So American, but I with American money it'd be the other way around, right? So I don't know about the American to European exchange, but
I don't know.
Yeah, that's it's a lot of money.
It's still a lot of money, even if we just discount the discounted rate. I mean, 224,000. That's still a lot.
That's a lot of money, and that was his personal line of credit that he told her to use.
Yeah.
Like, you got to have a real good
She's-
relationship with your boss to lose that much money.
They're going to start taking it out of her paycheck a little bit at a time.
Yeah, she would be working for them for like half a century after her death to pay that off.
That could be arranged.
Yeah. Oh, poor Mr.
Anyway.
Steele. He lost his finder's fee.
Yes. Well, I think that's going to be pretty much the case. Anytime he gets a finder's fee, somehow he's going to lose it. Anyway, it's now night. Laura and Remington are walking on a balcony overlooking the lights of the harbor. And Remington asks Laura, "So, does Remington Steele return to Los Angeles with you, or does he disappear back into the midst of the night?" Laura concedes that disappearing back into the mists of the night, it really isn't an option at this point. He's not only a nationally known detective, he's an international hero. Steele tries to make a joke, but it falls flat because Laura's not in the mood for jokes. She admits that they're a terrific team, professionally speaking. The problems only seem to arise when they try to cross the line between the bedroom and the boardroom, or the boardroom and bedroom, depending on whether you want carrots and peas or carrots and celery or celery and carrots.
It depends on how you want to wear your dickie.
Yes. To the left or to the right. They both care about each anyway, she says they both care about each other, but she has concluded that the only way their professional partnership will survive is if they don't try to carry on a romance at the same time. So she's done the very thing that has already caused their problem in this episode.
Yeah.
The very thing that has been a major source of issues between them, not just personally, but professionally as well. She has made a unilateral decision. And that decision is, of course, that they will not see each other outside of business hours. Steele is silent for a few moments, and then with a seemingly serious tone, but I think underlined with just a touch of mocking, he says that she's obviously given the decision a great deal of thought, and he's not going to try and talk her out of it. After all, they must respect each other's feelings, even though they may run counter to their own, especially then.
Yeah.
And of course, Laura is relieved. Okay, go ahead.
So you're right. She does the thing that he accuses her of doing. At the same time, when someone decides to end a relationship and the other person doesn't want them to.
It's not you, it's me.
Well, no, I just mean like if you break up with someone and that person doesn't want to break up, you're still making a unilateral decision for that person, because if two people are in a relationship but one of them doesn't want to be there, then there's not really much the other can say or do to stop that, I guess. So it's kind of fun, but you're right. Like it's a weird situation because she has every right to say, "I've decided I don't want to see you anymore." But at the same time, she's done this without talking to him about it. She's done this without, they haven't sat down and said, "Okay, well, do you think that this is going to work?" "I don't think it's going to work. I have my reservations. I'm thinking this might not be a good idea," whatever. She does present it as a very much I've made this decision and you don't have a say in it. Which kind of, if someone wants to end a relationship, the other person kind of doesn't. But at the same time, that's been his problem with her the whole time, is that all these decisions get made and he's the last to find out. So yeah, it's kind of a weird situation because, you know, it is something that somebody can decide and has a right to decide. But you're right. I think his comment when he says, like, "I have to accept it, even if my feelings are not," he's telling her what she wants to hear, what he thinks she wants to hear. But it's clear that he doesn't feel that way. I think he just knows that any sort of protests he makes at this point are just going to fall on deaf ears. So it's not worth.
Well, I think also his final line kind of sheds a little more light on his comments.
Yeah, that's true.
When he says, you know, they must respect each other's feelings, even though they run counter to their own, especially then, Laura is relieved, having feared that she would have to fight him all the way.
Do you think
and he
she's
says, "Well,
relieved
no.
here? Because when she says,
there's a touch of insincerity to it. Yeah.
she seemed a little disappointed as well as surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm not sure if this was one of those situations where she wanted him to fight her on it. Kind of like how sometimes she wants him to get jealous and stokes the fire there. But that moment where she says, "Oh, I'm really surprised," it feels like she's disappointed a little bit that he's not pushing back, that he just seems to accept it.
You know, I just, as you were saying that, I had a thought. I don't want you, but I want you to want me.
Well, and I don't even
an ego thing.
I don't even think that she doesn't want him. She does, but she's coming back to that. I can't trust him. It's going to ruin my business. I'm not going to.
But she still wants him to want her, even though she's not going to give him her. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
I definitely think that there's a part of her that wanted him to push back and wanted him to fight back on it, even a little bit. Not a lot, mind you. I think that if he had fought back too much, she would have felt that he wasn't respecting her. But I think, that she is a little bit slightly disappointed that he just kind of accepts it at face value. Yeah.
So anyway, Laura, as I said, is relieved, having feared that he would fight her all the way. And he says, well, no, not at all. After all, if she feels this strongly about it, they should try it and see how it works. Laura smiles and leans into him, kisses him on the cheek. Steele chuckles and then makes his prediction on the outcome of the plan. Give it a week. And they smile, a knowing smile at each other. Fireworks explode in the sky behind them, and we freeze.
Which I guess if you look at the mess that is the air date order, maybe he's right. I give it a week,
Well, especially since it's a weekly show.
On again, off again, on again. Yeah. Are they on again this week or are they off again? We don't know. It depends on where we put the episodes.
Yeah.
So,
anything else to say?
I think it's a pretty solid season opener. It feels like I think the only frustration I have is that the second season opener, basically every season opener, it feels like they're trying to set them back, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You've got season 1 where she was kind of holding him off, refusing to acknowledge that they even had a relationship. And by the end of it, they're clearly moving into relationship territory. Season 2, though, starts with how many other Captain Rioses are there out there looking for you? I don't want to do this. I don't trust, that there's not going to be people from your past that show up. So she's not sure about having a relationship. And then as season 2 goes by, they're clearly in a relationship. They express the desire to commit to each other. By the end of it, they are firmly in that territory. And so it feels like the writers were like, oh, we went too far here. We need to roll this back. Let's have them do something stupid. And I don't mind that. I mean, it's sort of par for the course that people screw up, but his screw up just felt like it was something really easily avoidable, especially with the amount of trust that they had by the end of season 2. So the premise of it sort of sticks a little bit, but the rest of it, I feel like is a really good, we're on location again. We've got Mildred being Countess von Krebs. We've got gorgeous vistas.
We got Mildred being Mildred.
Oh, and we didn't talk about how they've changed the credits again for the 3rd time and final credit change. They've gotten rid of them sitting in a movie theater watching themselves, and now it's just the song, the graphics, the shots. And I personally, this is my favorite credit sequence. I wasn't terribly fond of season 1's opening, mainly because you hear it enough times.
Season 1 was great.
I get the purpose of it because they have to explain the premise of the show. And if you're just dropping in at any point in the season, it might not be obvious, but I just feel like you hear that monologue enough times and it just gets so irritating. Whereas I like the tune and I like the shots and the credit sequences, and I'm a big fan of songs for openers. So the season 3 credit sequence onward are my favorite for this.
See, I think they could have taken the season 1 credits and kept the music and made it work. by just trimming it down, getting rid of the monologue and just trimming it down.
Yeah,
But that's
anything
just
that
me.
got, like, if you get rid of the monologue, like, it just, you hear that monologue so many, it's kind of like Highlander the series. Highlander the series did the same thing for the first season. They had a whole monologue about he's Duncan MacLeod, he's 400 years old, he's immortal, he can't die, and it just got like, okay, seriously. And then season 2, it was a Queen song. Sign me up. I'm in. Queen. Let's go. So I don't know. I like the opening credits for the season, and I like this as a solid season opener. They do have some good arguments and conversations. There's some good costumes and outfits and intrigue and mystery. It just I give it like a 7 out of 10 maybe.
Don't start with me. I know what you're doing. Don't start.
We're gonna have a top 5. Don't you worry.
Okay, well, if that's it, then website www.SteeleWatching.com. You'll find the show notes, links to Amazon movies, and the sound of an airplane flying overhead. Amazon movies will have Maltese Falcon, To Catch a Thief, Goldfinger, and Beau Geste, even though Beau Geste was not really referenced as a movie, but I mean, it was in there, so we'll count it. And then there's the other resources, which, what?
Should we also put the alternate season order just for interest if people want to see it? Or
we can do that, yeah. Let me add that to my notes. Alternate season order. Of course, there's probably somebody out there that has even an alternate season order. So, I mean, true. Where does it stop? Oh.
Stop the madness. Yeah,
it's an epidemic. Then we've got our other resources, which include
our Facebook fan page, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as the officially unofficial Steele Watchers Facebook group. So join that. You'll get to have all these fun conversations. People like to put up. I've noticed that what's kind of fun is that when we are leading up to an episode, usually others in the group will start posting other screen caps from that episode and start talking about that episode. So it really creates quite a cool atmosphere leading up to the episode dropping. So it's a lot of fun. So yeah, join us and contribute. Write fan fiction.
Yes.
Have fun.
Yes. And there's also a number of renowned members of the group. There's somebody named Judith Moose who wrote a book. And
you may have heard of it.
If you look around in the Facebook group, you might find a link to the PDF version of her book, Still Loved After All These Years. But you did not hear that from me.
I didn't.
No, you didn't. It's a secret. We can't tell anybody. Anyway, next episode, Lofty Steel, where Laura and Remington step into Quark's bar.
Well, and
no.
Yeah, fun. I met Armin Shimmerman at a Comic-Con because he was on. Sorry, I have to do this. He was on Buffy. He played. He was though. He was the school principal. He gets eaten by a giant demon snake, and so he was at a Comic-Con, and I got a chance to meet him, and he is absolutely lovely. He has this reputation of playing characters that are really surly and not very nice, but that could not be further from my experience. He was so nice. So yeah, seeing him in this episode is just wonderful because he's just such a neat human. So yeah, Quark / Principal Snyder is in this episode.
Okay. So I guess that's it.
Yep.
So see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that, yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sarah, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Every
it does.
single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.steelewatching.com to sign up.